even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive. A bit grey today, isn't it?
Well, hello everyone. I'm here. It's Monday once again, and it is time for the deepest lore. This one's been quite a while in the works. Welcome to the show, Red Hawk.
Thanks for having me, AA. This is going to be tons and tons of fun.
Yes, you can take a couple of couple of hours off from slaying Poontang or whatever you've been up to discuss some wholesome cartoons with me for a couple of hours, because as well as you're womanizing, Red Hawk, you're also you tell me an expert in the Looney Tunes. Is that right?
Yeah, I am a huge Looney Tunes nerd. Grew up watching all the Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes shorts when I was a kid. It was pretty much the only cartoons on in the house, and I've just, kept up my, Looney Tunes autism, throughout the years.
So, this basically started when I was getting sick of my daughter, who's just coming up to 3 years old, constantly watching Peppa Pig, which is basically the only thing she ever wants to watch. And so I was looking around for, well, why don't we watch an old Bugs Bunny cartoon or something? Couldn't bloody find it anywhere on any of the streaming services or anything like that. So I went and bought a 6-volume, 24-disc box set called the Looney Tunes Golden Collection, and I just started watching. I just sat and watched them with AAA, who actually, there's a couple of things. She has found them hilarious, but at the same time, part of me is like, should she be watching these? Because as we'll talk about, they're frequently quite risque and they're incredibly violent. The Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yeah, for sure. And there's some, multiple, and many of them have been banned at this point, from syndication on television for numerous reasons. But yeah, they do get to some dark places, and I'm sure we'll go over that.
So and I think we'll do our shillings in a moment, but I think part of the reason for that people forget, of course, is that these Looney Tunes cartoons were not designed originally for kids to watch on TV, which is what they were when I was a kid as well. We'll talk about that in a moment, but they were actually paired with films and shown before feature movies in the cinema. So the original audiences for many of these would have been adults, not kids, right?
Yeah, most of them were. And they were well, I guess we'll get into that, but yeah, they were originally meant for, adults. And then, when the television came along in, the 50s and the 60s, when it was much more commonplace to have one in the house, that's when they started getting syndicated for, kids.
So just before we get going, Red Hawk, is there anything you would like to promote, sir?
I will promote two things. I'll promote my own channel in the description. Red Hawk, we've been having some fantastic conversations over there. Man's Hour every Thursday is on there. We are 100 subscribers away from 1,000, so please go over there and give that a look. And then I'll also shill the Old Glory Club, where we've been doing some fantastic work over there, me and a bunch of the other American guys in our sphere. So go give us a look over there as well.
Yeah, and I'll just remind people you have 3 days left, including today. So today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, to get your 25% off all my courses and all the other courses at the academic agency with promo code MERIT.
Merit, pure merit, such merit. Merit, such merit. Merit.
And people are going to be so happy when they don't have to hear that again anymore. But if you're thinking again a course for Christmas or something like that, you might as well take advantage of the deal, because the deal will not be on over December. It's I do the 4 big sales a year, almost like Steam. I try try to do it like Steam, Red Hawk. So if you notice, the autumn sale is on Steam at the moment. I kind of try to do the academic agency with Steam. So
Yeah, it's a good business model. So
anyway, so yeah, let us. I made this this list of the core unit directors, and I thought this might be a good skeleton or a good frame to discuss the history of the company, and then in the second hour we'll talk about some of our favorite characters and some of our favorite cartoons and things. But for this is the deepest lore, Red Hawk, where we just do more than just talk about things. We want to get into stuff that nobody will know. I'm guessing most casual fans don't know any. Maybe the casual will know the name Chuck Jones.
Yeah, probably. He's probably the most famous, Looney Tunes director for sure.
But I certainly remember seeing the name Chuck Jones as a kid coming up as this, supervised by Chuck Jones or whatever, on the opening.
Well, that's an interesting note too, because Chuck Jones was the first guy in all of the animated studios to actually push for Leon Schlesinger was the guy they were working for at the time, but he was pushing for the animators and the directors to actually appear at the very beginning title credits. This wasn't something that Disney was doing or anything like that. So he actually pushed for it from the guys and said, hey, we're doing all the work here. I want my name on the opening title credits for all these shorts. So Chuck Jones was the first guy that did that.
So why don't we just very quickly go right to the start then? In fact, this is not right at the start. There is a kind of 1920s outfit under Leon.
Yes, Schlesinger or
Schlesinger, right?
However you pronounce it. Yeah.
Leon Schlesinger is the kind of big producer who is responsible for Looney Tunes, or at least initially he was. It was Leon Schlesinger Productions. But I would say, would you agree with me, Red Hawk, that the story starts in earnest really in about 1930, not really in the 20s?
Yeah, because kind of in the 20s, I mean, you had people like Freeling who were working in Kansas City with, a lot of guys who were working for Disney at the time. And eventually all of them came out, west to LA and everything like that. And it was kind of like a dark time because they were caught up in a bunch of, ridiculous, almost copyright infringement with, Walt Disney, because some of the characters they were making were pretty much complete mock-offs of, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. And so there were some, shade being thrown back and forth. But yeah, the real Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies didn't really find their footing until around the 30s.
So anyway, this guy, Leon Schlesinger, who is in many ways a kind of typical Hollywood producer, he's a proper cigar chomping old school producer. I think that's a fair characterization.
Yeah, very much so. He had no knowledge of the animating business beforehand, and he just saw this as an opportunity to make a bunch of money, and that actually worked out pretty well for these guys that ended up working at Termite Terrace, as we'll discuss here in a bit, because he was very, very hands off in his creativity. So he pretty much let all these 20-year-old guys just camp out in Termite Terrace and do their work, and it took basically most of the 30s to finally get their footing together. And then, all of his work finally paid off, because then they started making some pretty awesome characters that we all know and love.
Yeah. So I mean, in the landscape, in the animation landscape of this time, obviously it was Walt Disney, it spent the 1920s carving out a niche for animation at all, right? As a kind of viable commercial art form. Also, MGM had an animation department as well, I want to say. Were there any other ones around? I think those are the two kind of main.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
And these guys here, Harmon and Ising, in 1930 here, I believe they originally came from Walt Disney, and then they went to MGM. There's a guy at MGM who was called Fred Quimby, who you've probably heard of. He was another kind of big big producer or studio head, if you want, responsible for Tom and Jerry and things like that. And he, I don't know, he was like famously quite difficult to get on with and very disciplinarian and whatnot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I believe these guys harmonizing, um, I don't know, they were kind of trying to make it in the industry or whatever, but had already been bounced from Disney and MGM. So Leon Schlesinger brought them in here because, like you said, he didn't know anything about animation, couldn't draw or anything. So he brought those guys in on like a 3-year contract to essentially make the cartoons. Is that right? In the early 30s?
Yeah. Yeah, but also the big draw for them as well is that they got to keep the rights of any of the characters they created. So this is where you have like the original like, you know, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies character, Bosco, you know, the little boy. And when their 3-year contract was up, they took the rights to him away from them as well. So then Schlesinger had to go and collect, you know, the guys that we all know and love, McKimson, Chuck Jones, Freeling, and they had to create completely new characters.
Yeah, no, I'll just show you a picture of Bosco. I think you'd agree with me, Red Hawk, that I don't know what it is about the 1920s. Like all the mascots look like this dude. They're either cats or like strange kind of looking monkey men like Bosco here.
Yeah, you could definitely see the resemblance to like Mickey Mouse almost a little bit too, like the shape of the eyes and, you know, the smile and everything like that. You know, everyone was trying to, you know, get on the Walt Disney train.
Now, I think it's fair to say, but Bosco kind of sucks, Red Hawk.
Yeah, definitely not that great.
Like these early, I mean, I haven't watched like loads and loads of them, but I've watched enough to know that they're, I mean, not just rough around the edges, but they're just rubbish. They're not very enjoyable in my
Yeah,
opinion.
well, it's really interesting because, you know, a lot of these, you know, animations and shorts, when they first started off, like you were mentioning, they weren't meant for kids. They were meant for adults. So they were very, you know, serious, and they were just trying to show, you know, interesting animation styles in interaction with, you know, a lot of live action stuff. And then when like Tex Avery came along, is really when they actually started to become more comedies, and they actually started making jokes. And this is what actually set Warner Brothers apart, because they were the only guys making these shorts that were actually, you know, comedy based and were actually supposed to make you laugh. Everybody else, like, you know, Disney and MGM, everything at the time, were still doing very serious stuff. And so that, you know, they carved a niche for themselves, and, you know, they did a pretty damn good job with it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to see Leon Schlesinger as like the manager, I guess, or the Vince McMahon of this outfit, he's very much struggling to find his team in this era. Like, there's this guy Earl Duval, there's a guy called Tom Palmer, there's this guy Jack King who comes in, Red Hawk. He makes like another really crappy character whose name escapes me now. Who's the cat? You bring.
Yeah, it was like Foxy was the girl cat, and then there was another cat, the male cat. I forget the name. It's, you know, it escapes me right now. But yeah, they were only around for like 2 years, and then, you know, you really only start getting into our establishment characters in like 37, 38, when the first Looney Tunes star that we all know, Porky Pig, was first. You know, it's not Bugs Bunny, it's not Daffy Duck. The first one is Porky Pig.
Oh, yeah, and there's this other character called Buddy as well.
Yeah, yeah, kind of like a Pinocchio-looking character. You know, it's like a human little boy. Again, everyone was trying to, you know, get on what Disney was doing, but yeah, that wasn't. It didn't last very long. And again, you know, they still hadn't really found their niche yet.
Just to show you Buddy, he is like, again, I mean, I hate to say sucks, but he's like cloyingly sweet and kind of saccharine, and I mean, again, not very good. I'm not just saying this because they're not famous, Red Hawk. I think you'd agree that early 30 Looney Tunes just hadn't found its feet, and you know, it didn't really know what it was trying to do. This is just like kind of Disney knockoff rubbish.
Yeah, exactly.
But and then
Which actually kind of makes sense though, because most of these guys that were working at Termite Terrace were still in their 20s. I mean, these were all guys who literally their first job was working, for Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes and everything. Many of these guys, I mean, McKimson, Jones, and were all in their 20s at this time, so they were still, honing their craft.
You should probably explain what Termite Terrace is, Red Hawk, for
Yeah,
people watching.
yeah. Termite Terrace was the name given to them, their animation studios on the Warner Brothers lot, and they were given the name Termite Terrace because when the guys first moved in there, the place was crawling with vermin. There were rats, there was cockroaches and everything, and the name just ended up sticking, and they ended up using that studio. For the next 20 years until they got a new studio in the 50s, and they still kept the name. They put a big plaque that said Termite Terrace 2 on the new plaque of the building. But you just got to imagine that it was basically just a frat house at this point. There were no women in this studio. It's just a bunch of 20-year-old guys, directors, animators, and everything. And like we were mentioning before, how Schlesinger was not very hands-on with the directing and everything. So these guys basically just had free reign to do what they wanted. And this ended up having them butt heads a bunch because people like Chuck Jones were like over budget all the time, but it was very interesting how each of them were working on their own craft.
Yeah, my understanding as well is that when the original Termite Terrace was like knocked down or demolished or something like that, but apparently even the replacement building was really shoddy. I saw this account of a guy who went there from. Do you remember when Disney had his trouble with the unions? At some point, Leon Schlesinger picked up a pile of talent from Disney over the union disputes, and when all the Disney guys got there, they were like, "What the hell is this? Like the walls aren't finished. There's like crap on the walls. It's just like it was a real."
Yeah, and funny enough, Chuck Jones actually led one of those union riots outside of Walt Disney Studios. So, I mean, Chuck Jones was kind of a lefty, but he still was a pretty good artistic genius, as we'll discuss here shortly.
So they develop this system where there are these 4 units, right? Just to explain the kind of Leon Schlesinger structure, which is kept all the way through until they close the studios down. They have what I'm calling the number 1 unit, or the A team, if you want. They are the ones who work on all the cartoons that get the biggest budgets, and they get the best writers and the best staff. Then I've called it Unit 2, but essentially there's this guy, Fritz Frelling, who we'll talk about in a moment, who just had his own team, and that it just stays there all the way through. Is it fair to say that's a B team? Because it seems to me that a lot of the Frelling stuff is like, I mean, that unit won like what, 3 or 4 Oscars.
Yeah,
he won. Really famous cartoons come out of it. So, what's the deal with Frelling's unit in your view?
So, Fritz Freleng, he worked with Disney in Kansas City, and then came over to Warner Brothers. So, I mean, he knew Disney, and he worked with them back in the day, and he was the oldest guy, in Termite Terrace, and he kind of wasn't. He wasn't like the big idea guy. He wasn't like pushing all the boundaries like Chuck Jones was. He kind of kept things to. He very much played by the book, but it worked really well for him. He had a style that he really liked, and he just kept on going with it, and he made some pretty good stuff. I mean, he created a lot of the characters. He created Sylvester and Tweety. He created Yosemite Sam. So these were some of the guys that he came up with, and it's interesting when they get these established teams in the late 40s, and especially all the way through the 50s. They kind of all just work with their own characters at this point. Like Freleng did almost all of the Sylvester and Tweety shorts. He did almost all the Yosemite Sam shorts with Bugs Bunny. So that when they find their niche, they just keep on working what they love.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when we say he's by the book, I mean, he has like superb timing, like obviously really, really talented. But it's just that maybe not a massive risk taker. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah,
Like
he's
all
not doing like fourth wall breaks like Chuck Jones was doing, or adapting, operas into, shorts and stuff like that. Even though Freeling was one of the first guys to bring in, a lot of the musical and opera shorts because he was such a big fan of, classical opera and classical music. So he was like kind of one of the first to push this idea, but Jones really, really perfected it.
It's going to sound like a really weird analogy, but like if they had fighting styles or something, like I'd imagine Frelling would be like more of a Count Dooku, and Jones would be more of an Anakin or something, just bursting with
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
energy, enthusiasm. Sometimes he goes overboard or whatever. Whereas Frelling's a kind of classicist, I guess. But he's yeah, Freeling is like constant. Although he does go away for a little bit in the late 30s, which we'll talk about in a second. I don't know how many of the early Freelings have you watched, because he's a little bit kind of strange in the 30s, because um, Looney Tunes, and there's Merry Melodies as well. Because I was trying to like, what's the difference between Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies? They're the same, right? But
Yeah, the lines between the two of them get really, really blurred, especially when you get into the golden age in the late 40s and the 50s. But originally it was the Looney Tunes were all black and white, and then the Merry Melodies were the colored ones. And the Merry Melodies were more focused on like one-off characters and more musical numbers, a lot like what Disney was doing with stuff like Fantasia and stuff like that. But eventually the line just got so blurred because they ended up trading back and forth characters, because Porky Pig was originally a Merry Melodies character, but then he started appearing in Looney Tunes, and eventually they just combined everything together, which, when you see like the opening credits on so many of the Looney Tunes, you'll see like Merry Melodies is in some of them, and some of them it's not. It's, so eventually they just all get melded together.
yeah, so around this time, I think that, I mean, we said that Leon Slazenger is hands off, but he did have a few rules, didn't he? I know at one point Porky Pig breaks out as a star in a Tex Avery cartoon, right? And there's a mandate that they have to use Porky Pig in like every cartoon.
Yeah, yeah, they were trying to find, their Mickey Mouse basically at this point. So, for the longest time before that, there were a lot of like, one-shot characters and three-shot characters that only appeared, a handful of times. And then, Porky Pig was, for some reason, maybe it was his stuttering voice that made him unique. But he always had the stuttering voice since the very, very beginning. But maybe that's what, really drew audiences to him, really liked him. And yeah, then Schlesinger was like, oh, okay, we're going to make Porky Pig the face of everything. And then this is when you get other side characters to start to come in, like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny were both originally, foils for Porky Pig. The shorts were called Porky's Duck Hunt and the Porky's Rabbit Hunt. So Porky was out hunting ducks, and then he was out hunting a rabbit, and his adversary was Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, respectively. And that's where those main characters came from.
Yeah, I also seem to remember reading somewhere that I think the Merry Melodies originally had to have a musical number in it as well.
Yeah, yeah, that was a requirement.
There had to be a song, and I think Freeling dug that because he was into music. Right? He was into like classical music and things like that. So he actually does some quite good work on the musical Merry Melodies. Avery, from what I understand, didn't like doing musical numbers, and he didn't like being forced to use Porky Pig.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he didn't like it at all, and he would get into some fights with the higher ups at the time. And Avery's an interesting character too. I mean, we can kind of get into his animation style and such like that. I mean, he really is the guy that actually like started bringing comedy into most of the shorts. He was the one who started using gags and slapstick humor and everything like this, and defying laws of physics and everything like that. And his animation style is also very interesting because Avery actually lost an eye when working at Termite Terrace. Again, back to what we were talking about, how it was basically like a frat house. So one of the guys at Termite Terrace used a rubber band and a paper clip, and it took out one of his eyes. So his animation style was very interesting after that point because he didn't really have depth perception anymore. So he, a lot of his drawings were very, there was like a lot of right angles and such in his drawings, and very, it, it's hard to explain. You know, we kind of have to look at him, but he's got a very unique animation style.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
his
a lot
real
of
name
stills.
his
Yeah.
real name is Fred Avery, right? But he was this he was a Texan, so he's called Tex.
Hmm.
I kind of dig some of his uh, stuff, Red Hawk. I want to say he brings racism to the table as well. I noticed. I mean, it's there in a lot of them, but it, for some reason in Tex Avery's one, it seems like more marked than in some of the others. But he, as I understand it, tended to fight with the producer quite a lot. And this is how he ends up leaving the studio as well. There's something about what's the? Let me just look up the name of the actual cartoon. The Heckling Hare. There's an ending where Bugs is falling off a cliff with this dog.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Avery wanted to, have a long gag where they were like tumbling through cliffs and everything like that, but the studio thought it was too violent, and this is what eventually led to their falling out because they went behind his back and they cut the short, like a 15-second short, and it just had it fade to black, and it just didn't look good. It was very, very strange. It didn't end properly, and Avery got really, really pissed.
Yeah, and then he ended up leaving the studio as a result of it. And he actually went on to, I mean, I hate to say bigger and better things because obviously Looney Tunes goes on to be amazing. But I think in animation circles, Tex Avery is better known for his work at MGM, where he
Yeah,
did all
yeah,
sorts of Droopy and all sorts of other stuff.
yeah, and he famously was one of the big guys that worked on Tom and Jerry. So
Yeah, he had a few other weird quirks as well. Like he's always trying to bring in like real life footage into things, and he had this thing where he wanted to make like um like real life animals talk with like an animated mouth, and
yeah, yeah,
Leon wasn't up for that. And again, this is one of many things he clashed with him over. So. Um, What about some of these other names here? There's Frank Tashlin, who actually comes and goes a few times. You can see he has 3 different stints at the studio. Anything about him in particular?
nothing too like extraordinarily special about him. You'll see like with a lot of names on this list. A lot of people like kind of come and go. They really weren't the big swingers. At the animation studio, and when these guys like leave and they come back, they're bouncing around all over the place. They're going to MGM, they're going to Disney. I mean, Chuck Jones even left for a while, and he went to work on Sleeping Beauty at Walt Disney. So there's a lot of guys that are hopping around. You know,
It also worth mentioning that this chap here, Oob Iwerks, was one of Disney's original, like Walt Disney now, one of his original co-creators. I think he made that Steamboat Willie thing with Mickey Mouse in it.
yeah, he like whistling. Yeah,
Yeah, like he is the co-creator of that cartoon. But again, like so many of them, he fell out with Disney for whatever reason, went on his own, set up his own studio, and Slazenger wanted to expand basically beyond the 3 units. So he subcontracted the 4th unit out to iWorks. But then these guys didn't, like the iWorks guys didn't know how to use the Warner Brothers characters, if you want to put it that way. So they actually sent Bob Clampett over to the iWorks studio to basically like tell them how to do the house style and all that. And as I understand it, iWorks just disappears one day, or he just leaves or something, his own
yeah,
studio. And so Clampett basically ends up taking over, and then they just bring it in house after that. So Bob Clampett picks up this 4th unit is created essentially with Clampett, who becomes quite an important character. So do you want to talk about him for a little bit?
yeah. Clampett was one of the influential guys who actually came up with the official Bugs Bunny design. Bugs made like 3 or 4 appearances before they actually gave him his official name and official title. And they were kind of playing around with what they wanted to do with him, his design, his mannerisms, the voice. Mel Blanc played around with it a little bit. I mean, he's someone we should be talking about too. But yeah, so Clampett comes in and he's got also a very interesting style. And then famously, he and Chuck Jones had a really, really big feud between the two of them. They did not like each other. They worked on a couple shorts together. And then famously, when the short aired, Jones was under the impression, like I was mentioning earlier, this wasn't at the time when animators and directors were included on the, opening credits for all these shorts. And so at the time, Jones was under the impression that Clampett and him were going to be co-directors. And then when the short that they were working on together actually aired, it said directed by Clampett, and then supporting role, Chuck Jones. And he was written further down in very much smaller print, and Jones just basically flipped out on him, and they hated each other ever since. And famously, because Jones stayed with the studio for the longest time, and this would even go on to in the 80s when they made a movie called the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie, in which Bugs Bunny kind of gives like a history to the audience of like the animators and everything. And of course, the movie was directed by Chuck Jones, and famously in that movie, Clampett isn't mentioned one time. He's not mentioned at all.
That is pretty bitter and petty, I would say.
Yeah.
That's kind of sly. I didn't know that. So you can see that after that falling out, fortunately for Chuck Jones, Tashlin leaves randomly. So because Jones was working under Clampett in that unit, and he comes out and takes over Tashlin's unit there in around the time of that falling out. So he picks up his own unit, which I think he would keep. I think he pretty much keeps the same unit all the way through, even though it starts off as the third unit and ends up as the premier one. Is that correct?
Yeah, he keeps the same guys, like Mike Maltese and Tim Pierce are like the storyboard guys, and Jones himself would end up becoming the director there, and Warren Foster would join them as well. And yeah, he basically just kept his unit going the entire time. But once Clampett left, he became the A Squad.
Yeah. So anyway, when Tex Avery had that falling out over the cliff or whatever it was, it's just such a weird reason to leave a job. Oh, you changed the ending of my cartoon, I can't stay. But after he leaves, Clampett takes over. He actually does take over the first unit. Like, he moves buildings, takes over Avery's team and things like that. He has an animator called Robert McKimson working for him, but Clampett is known, Red Hawk, for, let's just say, kind of uniquely rubbery or fluid style, kind of wackiness, like surrealism. The Bob Clampett shorts that I've watched have just been off the wall. Porky and Wacky Land, and
yeah, they're definitely very trippy cartoons, to say the least.
Yeah, there's one that I couldn't believe it when I was watching it. It was called basically Elmer Fudd is just sick of losing to Bugs Bunny, and over the course of the cartoon, he's like, I'm done with hunting rabbits. I'm just going to go back to fishing. I'm going to concentrate on fishing, and I don't want to hunt rabbits anymore. And Bugs Bunny is like, what about my contract? What about my career? I need you, Elmer Fudd, because I'm a big star now.
Yeah, that's another thing that was very interesting that Warner Brothers did that none of the other studios were doing. They broke the fourth wall a lot. There were a lot of references to like Mr. Warner, our contracts. They were really trying to make the characters seem like they were real people, and gave them more personality. So there's tons of references for them, like, Bugs has his own contract with the Warner Brothers, Elmer has his own contract, and in that exact short, Elmer rips apart his contract, and says, Mr. Warner, can shove it, basically. And yeah, it's very interesting. It was, and again, that was kind of like Avery's idea, because he did a lot of, live action stuff mixed with the animation. And so, it was an interesting idea that really paid off for him.
Yeah, so there's a very dark twist in that, because Bugs Bunny wants to keep Elmer Fudd hunting him, essentially. So he launches a psychological warfare against Elmer Fudd and basically reprograms him through like sleep hypnosis, or like tries to inject himself into his dreams. And you get this whole like trippy sequence where Elmer Fudd is like dreaming of rabbits and things, and when he wakes up, he's, now is compelled obsessively to hunt rabbits forevermore. It's just excessively dark material.
Yeah, that
But
short's called the Big Snooze. Yeah.
the big snooze. But this, I would say, is this combination of kind of insane surreal imagery and breaking the fourth wall, and just kind of a sense that anything could happen, is what I associate with the Bob Clampett shorts. And I think that if you watch before and after Clampett, some of it is there in the Avery as well, but Clampett like takes it up to 11, and I think some of those things stay forever after that. Like just things like I don't know, like you grab Daffy Duck by the neck and his eyes pop out, or I don't know. I was watching one just now where Bugs Bunny gets out like a stick of TNT, and he goes to give it to Elmer Fudd, and it kind of deflates like a balloon. Just these kind of physics defying things that we associate with cartoons now. But as far as I can see, Clampett brought a lot of that himself.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look back on it now, because so many of the cartoon tropes that we know now growing up were basically just invented by these guys. Like it was very, very strange to have a cartoon that was just not based in reality at all, in the sense of, oh, you can just stop falling, because you're not looking down. Gravity only works when you look down, and TNT just sets you on fire and doesn't actually blow you up, and weird physics defying stuff, and just really goofy animation and everything like that. They really just decided to totally flip the book on its head, basically. And it really paid off for them.
I took a screen grab of that stick of TNT there. And also around this same sort of time, they were like doing some crazy things. Like this is a Tex Avery one where they went Art Deco for a little while. See if I can find some others. Hold on. I put them all in this thread here. It's just see if I can find that other one. Give me 1 second, because I took a picture of it. Red Hawk, you there?
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff like this, like the Hollywood parodies that they did around this time. I mean,
they were still trying to find their footing at this point. They had a bunch of like one-offs and things like this, and it really didn't get into like the late 40s and the 50s when they really just decided to stick with all the characters that we know and love now. They were still trying to find who's going to be the big winner, who's really going to stick with audiences, and everyone had their own different ideas too, because Jones famously at this time, he was trying to go after what a lot of like what Disney was doing. He was doing a lot of character development, really expensive backgrounds, really, really slow and methodical animation styles, patched with music and timing and stuff like that. And Jones wasn't really like a big, comedy guy at this point. So it's interesting to see how everyone was still trying to find their footing, even though they were, they were really getting the ball rolling here with some of these guys, but it really wasn't enough to fill out like a full roster. I mean, we don't get characters like, Roadrunner and Coyote and all this stuff until like the 50s. So, they're still figuring stuff out.
Yeah, but I would say this period around 1942 is really interesting because it's wildly experimental. Like, I mean, this one, the Dover Boys, the full title is The Dover Boys at Pimento University, or the Rivals of Rockford Hall. I mean, everything in this cartoon is stylized, and it's almost like the characters are like kind of almost like stick men. They kind of move with really stiff gestures. And how can I put it? The move away from realism means there's a lot more trying on of wildly different styles, like the Art Deco, which I mentioned, some of the surrealism, a lot more than you expect, I think, from Warner Brothers cartoons. In this period where they haven't quite found, the formula. So I find that kind of interesting. Also, you pick up on little prototypes of, like, this is from that same cartoon, and I just thought that's literally Wile E. Coyote right there in
Yeah,
in,
that's
in embryo.
yeah, that's like a famous blueprint that Wiley would end up drawing, to try and catch the Roadrunner. So yeah, you could definitely see a lot of early inspirations, we're going on here.
All right, so just moving forward a bit more, and yeah, so they basically settle in. Freeling goes away for a little period, and there are some other dudes who come in, but I don't think it's that important. There are a few other guys who pick up this fourth unit, but eventually it goes to Bob McKimson. In fact, I should mention with Bob McKimson, he famously turned down when Avery left and Clampett went over to Unit 1. They offered McKimson Unit 3 here, and he turned it down for reasons unknown, and that's how Chuck Jones got his in. So anyway, they went back to him 5, 6, 7 years later, and now he was ready to accept to be a director rather than just an animator. And he picks up the fourth unit. And for a period of about a year or so, they've got this foursome of Clampett, Freeling, Jones, and McKimson.
That really is like the Looney Tunes all-star lineup right there. Those four guys, are they're the best of the best for sure.
Now McKimson, we'll talk about a bit more in a moment, Red Hawk, but would you say that it's fair that he has a rep, among like animation fans and so on? He has the rep of being like the least of these four.
Yeah, he's definitely he's the one that makes like the smallest splash, so to speak. But he still has some really good ones. I mean, he famously he created Foghorn Leghorn and Barnyard Dog and the Tasmanian Devil. So I mean, he still has some shining spots in there, but he definitely is outshined by Jones and Freeling for sure. And Clampett and others, but he still puts out some really good work, and he still has some very memorable shorts. But he kind of gets tossed around with a bunch of characters too. Like he does direct some Bugs Bunny shorts, he does direct some Sylvester and Tweety shorts. He gets some time to work with other characters, but he doesn't really have his own I guess legend, so to speak, that guys like Jones does.
Foghorn and Leghorn's the closest he's got to his own guy, right?
Yeah.
But is there a thing with like Sylvester's son? That's the McKimson thing.
Yeah, that was McKimson as well. Yeah, like they kind of got sick of just putting Sylvester with Tweety, and they ended up giving Sylvester a son, Sylvester Jr., and McKimson had a running gag where a baby kangaroo named Hippity Hoppity would, be mistaken as a giant mouse. And so Sylvester got into a bunch of trouble, trying to catch this giant mouse, and then, his son being ashamed of him because he got his ass kicked by a mouse.
I mean, I think McKimson in wrestling terms is what you'd call, he's a good hand, right? But he's basically workmanlike, and he just kind of grinds them out, he churns them out. And frequently he'd have the lesser budgets and things like that. So he's very much a kind of, I don't know, like, I don't want to run him down too much, but he's just a bit more work a day than Jones, who's like a, genius, and Freeling, who, as we said, is kind of masterful, I guess you put it that way. And Clampett is just in his own world. So, that that's a fair characterization. I don't want to run him down.
Yeah. I mean, by no means is he, like bad at his job or anything like that. But he's just not, really pushing the limits of animation or making these really famous shorts like Jones does. But he's a worker bee. He's he's a workhorse, and he does a really good job. But he's just not as famous as the other guys.
So for some reason, Clampett leaves in 46. I couldn't find the reason why. It's like a mystery or something. Why Clampett left?
Yeah, yeah. No one really knows, to be honest. And then he just decided one day to pack up and leave. Some say it's his ongoing feud with Jones. Some say he wasn't getting paid enough. Nobody really knows. But yeah, he left. And then Jones takes over.
We should have mentioned in terms of the internal dynamics of the company, while Tex Avery was always fighting with Leon Slazenger, Bob Clampett was like kind of golden boy. He was just like Slazenger just loved him.
Yeah,
could do no wrong. And
Yeah.
this kind of rubbed everyone else up the wrong way because he was always just saying like be like Bob and things like that.
Yeah, and again, that just fueled more of the issues between him and Jones, because Jones at the time, he still hadn't really found his stride. I mean, we were talking about earlier about how Jones was doing these very, interesting and intricate backgrounds to all of his shorts, and he was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And Jones was always the guy that got his budgets cut the most out of everybody. But Clampett got extravagant budgets for all of his shorts that he was doing, and Jones was like, hey, I'm really onto something here. I'm really figuring this stuff out. I'm getting really good at this, and all of his shorts are always getting cut. Jones had this one character, Sniffles the mouse, who was really starting to catch on, and he was he really thought that this was going to go far. He ended up cutting the character, when he ended up getting hold of like Bugs Bunny on the A-Team. But he really wanted to invest more time in this character that he made, but they ended up cutting him. And so more reason why Jones and Clampett weren't fans of each other.
I mean, in fairness, you're in Unit 3, Jones. Know your role, son. But I guess that's what it is, isn't it? When you have someone who's like that, who's ambitious, they're never going to accept being in Unit 3. He was always going to want to get his hands on the big budgets, which he would do for pretty much 20 years or 15 years, from 47 to 63. I mean, that's a hell of a long run. And to basically, when Clampett leaves, Jones inherits the Unit 1, although, as we said, he keeps all the same guys, and I think he sticks in the same building as well, but he ends up with like the kind of Unit 1 budget, if that makes any sense. McKimson goes into this Unit 3 slot, and they bring in this guy called Arthur Davis, who's kind of a little bit Clampett-y, but he's also uses a kind of some cinematic innovations and things like that. But he was the one, like, when there was a downturn, I think they cut his unit. Leon Slazenger was like, we don't have the budget to have 4 units anymore. So they went down to 3. And it stayed like that basically over what is obviously the golden period of Looney Tunes, which we're going to talk about with the rest of the show. That is the 3, the A-Team, the B-Team, and the C-Team. Jones, Freeling, McKimson. And every once in a while, maybe somebody else would fill in doing something else.
Yeah. And Davis got a couple directorial, opportunities in this time. I think he directed like 5 or 6 shorts, and yeah, so they had a couple people come in and out, but it basically was the 3-man squad at this point. They found their stride. They had their established characters. And then when you're getting into this golden age here in the late 40s into the 50s, this is when they found their stride, and then each guy starts coming up with their own characters. I mean, Jones comes up with Pepe Le Pew and Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. Freeling does his Sylvester and Tweety, Yosemite Sam. He also came up with Speedy Gonzales. And then you got McKimson, who had, Tasmania Devil and Foghorn Leghorn, and then Sylvester Jr. So, while they were working with the establishment ones, which they all got access to, like all of them worked with Bugs Bunny, all of them worked with Daffy Duck, all of them worked with Porky Pig, but they also had like these side projects, these side characters that they imagined for themselves. And they had such a reputation at this point. They're like, yeah, I like this character. I'm going to work with him. He's mine.
Yeah. So if you imagine Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote is purely Chuck Jones. If you've ever seen a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, the classic ones, I'm not talking about ones they've made since then, but I'm talking about like from this run, the classic Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoons. It's a Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones will have done it because nobody else worked on Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, right? And if it's a Tweety Pie, and Sylvester, it's a Freeling, and I guess if it's a Foghorn Leghorn, it's a McKimson, right? Is
Yep,
that right?
pretty much. Hmm.
Now, they also made a couple of other changes, I would say, to the big characters as well. I mean, they each had their own personal way of using Bugs Bunny. They each had their way of using Daffy Duck, but I think some of the changes Jones made to Daffy Duck we probably should mention here as well, because
Oh yeah.
if you watch Daffy Duck in the early cartoons, in the Avery and the Clampett ones, he is well, wacky or zany. I don't know how you screwball. How do you?
Yeah, he's got a very, Woody Woodpecker vibe to him. He does a lot of laughing and hooting and hollering and jumping around and just, he's just like a trickster character who's just causing problems everywhere he goes. And he doesn't really have a personality outside of that. And then Jones took a huge gamble. This was unheard of at the time. And we could get into this, which are probably, the single-handedly the three most famous Looney Tunes shorts that probably everyone is aware of is the hunting trilogy. So, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, fire. Jones came up with this, and it was very, very unheard of at the time for them to mix like two really big name characters together, and then to specifically have one of the characters be like the foil of the other one. So this is the first time that Bugs and Daffy are on screen together in an adversarial manner. And it was a really, really big gamble at the time because they thought like, oh, this is going to make, audiences hate Daffy for some reason. But it really stuck, and this is where like the rivalry between Bugs and Daffy is born, and just they kept this rivalry going for the rest of the age of the studio.
Yeah, so Daffy Duck becomes so he goes from being this kind of zany character who has this high pitched whoa whoa. I can't really do it, but he's like jumps up and down and bouncing off the walls and things like that, to this really kind of surly, frustrated, angry kind of just Daffy Duck, basically the character that we know. But if you ask me, it's a change for the better, because this version of Daffy Duck is the one. It's not just the one we grew up with. You can put him in so many different situations and mix him with so many different characters, and it will produce something good just because of his basic personality. So
yeah, it actually gives him like, personality, gives him traits. He's much more like vindictive, much more greedy, much more prideful, and you definitely see this in a lot of like the later shorts when, he and Bugs are literally like on a stage together trying to one up each other, and Bugs is being interviewed on TV and Daffy tries to get on TV with them and stuff. So it becomes a much more healthy rivalry where it kind of like played out in real life too, because Bugs Bunny at this point, when this short came out, he's the face of Warner Brothers Animation. He's the face of Warner Brothers. He's the cultural icon that we all know him today. He really is established at this point. And then, but Daffy is like second banana to him, which basically is true at this point. Like as far as Looney Tunes characters go, like Daffy Duck is second place, and this is kind of where it gets established.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of do you think it's fair to say this version of Daffy basically always loses, and Bugs Bunny always lands on his feet and always wins? Is that fair?
Yeah, pretty much. It's very rare that Daffy Duck gets a win.
They also transitioned Porky Pig because I think people had struggled to know how to use Porky Pig for years, and we mentioned Tex Avery didn't like Porky Pig, didn't like being forced to use him, and he used this device to get around it, which was essentially have Porky as a framing character to introduce a story, basically, and then he could say, well, I've used him now, and then he's not in the story, if that makes any sense. So,
yeah, pretty much. He kind of would use like Porky Pig as a springboard to, introduce another character or something like that. And at this point, Porky Pig, even though he was the start of, what we now know as the core of Looney Tunes characters, at this point in the golden age, Porky Pig is strictly, a second banana character. So often he's a sidekick to Daffy Duck a lot. Robert McKimson works with, basically McKimson works with Porky Pig, solely at this point, and he uses him as like a sidekick to Daffy Duck, or Daffy Duck is a salesman throughout a lot of the 1950s, and he's trying to sell something to Porky Pig. So McKimson worked on all of those. Or you have a picture here with Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century. Porky Pig is a sidekick to Daffy in that one as well.
See if I can find that.
It was in that thread somewhere.
I did put it there somewhere, didn't I? Let me see if I can find it. That's an amazing cartoon, by the way. I'll see if I can find it. Hold on. There we go. Just amazing cartoon. But I mean, if you look at how Clampett and the earlier directors used Porky Pig, and how the relationship with Daffy was, it would be that, I don't know, like this sort of scenario, right? Porky Pig's trying to go on holiday, he's trying to pack his bags. Daffy bugs the shit out of him. Right. Yeah. That's the setup. Whereas in this era, especially the way Jones uses him, there's a bit of that in the McKimson ones. I want to say, I think McKimson in his own way is a kind of like quiet reactionary against the other two. Like he keeps like Clampett traditions going like quietly in some of his. If you really pay attention, you'll see that there are elements of the old Daffy and the old Porky in the McKimson directed ones, but in the ones that Jones does, especially, it's almost like kind of Captain Mannering and Sergeant Wilson from Dad's Army. You probably don't get that reference, but you like Daffy is the number one, Porky is a sidekick, but he's like sensible and competent, gets things done.
Yeah, and so many
Daffy's
of these,
like kind of an idiot. Like
and so many of these, whether Daffy Duck is a sheriff in a western town or he's, a space explorer or whatever it is, like he's the lead, but it's Porky Pig, the sidekick, that is actually competent and is actually, doing most of the work, even though Daffy is like taking credit for everything. So yeah, it's interesting. And at this point, they had totally found their stride. And I think another person we should mention here, Mel Blanc, the voice actor who did all of the voices for all of these characters.
Oh yeah, actually, we should mention Blanc and also the music guy as the really core people in the team. So why don't you tell us about Blanc?
Yeah, so he got his start in Oregon on terrestrial radio, and when he was on a radio show, they had budget cuts. And in order to compensate for the budget cuts, he started doing wacky voices and different voices of different characters. So he was kind of like a one-man show, doing a lot of like Abbott and Costello kind of stuff, where he was doing, wacky voices and talking to himself. And he eventually got a role, at Warner Brothers. And at this point, Mel Blanc is the established, voice actor for all of these characters. And he was an absolute legend. He had hundreds of different voices. Every single character in the Looney Tunes roster, except for Elmer Fudd, he voiced. So he really is just one of a kind, very unique voice, and also a first for animation in the sense of back what we were talking about in the Hunting trilogy. There's a scene in that first one where Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny dress up as each other to try and fool Elmer Fudd. So Bugs dresses up as Daffy and Daffy dresses up as Bugs. And Mel Blanc actually did voices for those characters imitating each other, which is extremely, extremely difficult to do. And he pulled it off flawlessly. So, he had like, what would Bugs sound like if he was imitating Daffy? What would Daffy sound like if he was imitating Bugs? So he really was just a master of his craft.
I mean, to think he is the voice of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Porky Pig. The Porky Pig voice is his as well, and Tweety Pie. And Sylvester. I mean, they're all him.
Yeah,
and it's kind of incredible.
Yeah, and he could even, make a short go amazingly well. I mean, just by grunting. I mean, he was Tasmanian Devil, and he did that as well. It's the man's, vocal, skills are just unmatched, and he really is like the father of voice acting and everything. I mean, you ask anybody, a voice actor, and Mel Blanc is who you turn to.
Couple of little bits of deep lore on him, Red Hawk. Much like Chuck Jones and some of the other guys, he did have an ego, and he was aware of his own like value. Let's just say, I think, was the first voice actor to get credit of any kind on the animated shorts.
Yeah,
They used
much like
to,
Jones, he was the first one to push for, his name to be in the opening title scene.
yeah, and I think he managed to secure like an exclusive contract, and he was on like pretty big money. The other bit of deep lore, so legend has it, Red Hawk, is that he was allergic to carrots. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah,
Didn't
that
like
is
carrots.
yeah, that is a little bit of deep lore, but in the shorts when Bugs is indeed chewing on one, I mean, it's all real. So he was, actually chewing on them. No, but yeah, that is the thing. Another deep lore about him is that I forget what year it was. I think it might have been 61 or maybe it was 59. I forget, but he got into a really, really fatal, like a really, really bad car accident. And for it was like a 8 or 9 month period, he was doing all of his voice acting from the bed in the hospital bed. So they would like bring in the voice equipment. He would record all the voices and everything while he was still in like this full body cast, in this car accident. I mean, the guy almost died, but he was still doing his, voice acting and everything, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah. On the carrots, the legend is that because he hated them so much, he saved all the carrot stuff to last. Like he'd do all his stuff, and then his final, like his last bit in the studio, would be the carrot stuff. So, um, one of the things that I have wondered about with Blanc is that his schedule must have been insane. I mean, they in the 50s they were banging out, all three of those units were banging out what, like 20, 30 shorts each a year, and
Yeah,
he voiced them all.
yeah, he did all of them, which is mind-boggling to
I mean,
think.
I don't know when he ever slept. Like, I mean, how does he well, unless they did it quickly in one take or something like that. I mean, it's a lot of material to get through.
Yeah, and a guy in the chat just pointed out as well. I mean, he was doing these voice character roles all the way up until the 80s. Like I mean, the traditional Warner Brothers studios closed in what was it, 63 or 64?
63, yeah.
Yeah, 63. But he still did all the voices, for the characters on, terrestrial television. The famous Who Framed Roger Rabbit movie where they had a crossover with Disney characters. He still did all the voices for those. So the guy was doing these, characters basically until he died.
The one other thing I learned about the sound of Looney Tunes is that he recorded a lot of his all his stuff, right, on a big open stage. So you can imagine these days you'd go into a little kind of sound booth studio, right, and you'd kind of record sitting down. Whereas, as I understand it, Blanc recorded on an open stage, in like a theater. So it kind of so you can hear the energy because he actually gave a performance. Like if you watched him, he'd be gesticulating, he'd be all over the place.
Yeah, he would actually
Um,
walk around and he would, gesture the characters that he was, imitating and everything. And, like famously, that Bugs and Thugs short where Bugs is like, oh, he's hiding in the stove, eh? Like Bugs is like zipping around the room. He would do that, when he was acting out Bugs like in the short and everything. So yeah, he really, really got into it, which I guess you kind of have to if you have this many characters bouncing around in your head. You kind of just have to get into that mind space to keep everything together.
yeah, but if you think about like vocal performances in cartoons and things now, I'm actually wondering, is that one of the reasons why there's a kind of qualitative difference between, it's all kind of quite flat now because everybody's just in like a soundproof booth, so you don't get the kind of animated, or just you don't get the wildness, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
the only guy I could really think of, the one guy who actually took after Blank for his voice acting roles was Mark Hamill. When he
mhm.
voiced the Joker in much
Joker,
of
yeah.
the animated shorts, he would really get into it as well, and he would move around and gesticulate and everything like that. So yeah, it's a definitely unique style for things. But just imagining, how, Blank was doing this stuff. I mean, he's got like the script in front of him and he would just have to change like characters like on the dime so often. Some of these things he's like, okay, here comes the Daffy voice, and the next line, here comes the Bugs Bunny one. And, oh, I got to switch again to this one. And under this circumstance, it must have been wild, for him to, do this stuff in the studio.
Yeah, so there's another really important person who we haven't mentioned, and that is Carl Stalling. Shall we talk about him? He was the composer. Just to get up a picture of him, who basically hadn't. Did they use a full orchestra, Red Hawk, or he had a band?
Yeah.
And he, from the moment he came in, pretty much until the end, he did a unique score for every single short that they put out.
Yeah.
Which is, again, talk about work rate and dedication to the craft and so on. I think it's worth mentioning with him that he basically invented, let's just say, the kind of musical grammar of cartoons, if that makes it sounds pretentious to say that, but
yeah. I mean, again, like we were talking about earlier about how so many of these like famous cartoon tropes that are just like second nature to us at this point were basically just invented by these guys. So I mean, Stalling, like you were talking about how just like the music will just set the tone for like emotions in a scene or something like that, like how you're supposed to feel. Go back and watch some of these shorts, and you'll see like circumstances where, like even without talking, you can establish like the emotion of a character on screen because of like the music that's going on in the background. It was all like perfectly tuned to that actual scene. It was matched perfectly to like when a character would like zip across the screen or like take a step or would like smack something or stick a dynamite would go off or something like that. It was a unique score for every single short, which is just amazing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things we just take for granted, like, I don't know, imagine a character who's running and the piano scales as he's running, right? We just take that for granted in cartoons now, but that was something that he invented. Or, I don't know, like, whenever there's something a little bit raunchy, he always brings in the same kind of sleazy music.
Yeah.
There are all these little cues that he gives us just through repetition and through, he almost like kind of trains you into this grammar. It's the only way to and you kind of don't realize that it didn't exist until he invented it. And basically all subsequent cartoons, not just the Looney Tunes ones, but all cartoons basically copy that. Even today, if you watch a cartoon, many of those same tropes are still there. Those sound cues, those musical cues.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine like not having cartoons where, like a scene where Sylvester like opens a door and Hippity Hoppity is there and he's just completely surprised and his eyes pop out and you hear like the big trumpets like go off in the background like he's exclaiming, it's like surprise and everything. That's totally like a Stalling invention, but it really is just a trope that's all over cartoons now.
Yeah, and there's a few famous and I think award-winning as well, music-centered Looney Tunes, aren't there? Where where Bugs Bunny's a composer or he's playing the piano, or
shorts where there's zero dialogue, it's just music. Yeah, there's a couple of those, and then I guess we can also get into the two most famous musical shorts. The first one in 1950, Chuck Jones directed, Rabbit of Seville, which is a play on, the classic opera Barber of Seville. And he uses the same score from that opera, and it perfectly lines up with the short, and which is honestly amazing to think about. Go watch that short and then go listen to the music afterwards, and it's a 1-for-1, overlap, and they perfectly timed things going on in the short with the actual musical numbers in the orchestra, which is amazing to think about. And that was a Jones invention that he ended up perfecting in What's Opera Doc, which is in 1957. And that one is actually in the America's Hall of Fame. Basically, we have a God, what the hell is it called? The vault, basically that America has for saved shorts, and that's one of the few Looney Tunes ones that's in there.
Yeah, I mean, people tend to credit, Disney with stuff like Fantasia and whatnot, but arguably he was doing it before them because I think he starts in 35, 36, something like that, and even the ones he does in the late 30s are really very innovative in the way that they um because how exactly did it work? Did he sit down with the storyboard and write the score to it, or did they give him the completed cartoon and he would write to that? Like, do you know how it worked?
Yeah, he'd have an active role, like in the storyboard. He'd kind of like see what was going on beforehand, and then he could kind of like think about how he wanted to, put a certain instrument or certain, musical number in at a certain point. I mean, they kind of had to do it that way because it was the only way he could really, keep up, with what was going on. Because again, like I guess we should kind of go over how long it actually takes to make one of these shorts from start to finish.
Mhm.
It took them over a year, to put a 7-minute short, all together, at the end of it, which is amazing to think about. Between all the drawings, between all the backgrounds, between all the animations, between all the musical numbers and the voice acting, it took them over a year to do like just 7 minutes.
And considering they were making like what 60, 70 a year sometimes, that's incredible that they
Yeah.
managed to make that many. And that is why actually they stopped making them in 63. But I think it takes Warner Brothers like another like 3 years to run out of stuff they'd already got in the can. If that makes any
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
um, the one other thing to mention about stalling is that he was also really good at kind of referencing popular songs of the day. And this is one of those things that, because we're not guys from the 1930s and 40s, are kind of lost to us. So I actually went on a interesting journey of discovery, Red Hawk, that a lot of the famous Looney Tunes bits that we know are actually like popular songs of the day, including the Merry Melodies music and the Looney Tunes music as well.
Yeah, there's
But
a lot of pop culture references, I guess, in there at the time, which, a lot of it's lost on us. Like you'll have a character break out into singing like "We Were Sailing Along on Moonlight Bay," and that's, pop culture reference of the time and everything. So yeah, there's tons of that in there.
yeah, I was actually really surprised to find that there was a song called "Merrily We Roll Along," which is the main. So because Warner Brothers uh essentially, because it was their cartoons, they gave them access to all of the music under Warner Brothers copyright, essentially, which is how they were able to get away with this. Weren't sued and so on. But I'll just people might be interested. You've heard this tune like a million times, but it was actually this song originally.
Too many frowns can change the brightest disposition, and sure as clouds can darken the tone. Yet every joy in life has been our one ambition, and that's how we intend to go on. Merrily we roll along, my honey and me. Verily, there's no one half as happy as we. Though it's wise as poor as mice, say, what do we care?
Recognize that tune, Red Hawk?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Oh, we've been so wealthy in the love that.
So there we go. I mean, just kind of interesting. Anything else, Red Hawk, about the creators before we actually get into some of our favorite characters and good cartoons and so on?
No, I think we touched on all the big guys, all the big wigs, so to speak. I mean, and there's plenty of animators and storyboard guys that we just don't have time to cover because we'd be here all day. But yeah, these guys were the A team for sure, and they basically pioneered what would become cartoons that we know today.
I think it's probably worth mentioning. One thing that we didn't mention is how they all slightly use Bugs Bunny differently. They had a different like vision of what he was. I remember hearing or reading somewhere that Chuck Jones had a rule. Chuck Jones was really big, even though he was this really creative guy. He was very big on rules, as we get into when we talk about Roadrunner. but he had a few rules with Bugs Bunny, like Bugs Bunny would never start the war,
Yeah, he would
right?
never strike first. And,
He-
the famous line, of course you realize this means war is, Chuck Jones' invention. And so, like, in all the shorts, no matter who Bugs Bunny's up against, whether it's a boxer, a rival baseball team, Elmer Fudd, Daffy Duck, or, whoever it is, the bull, and, when he's a matador, Bugs never, fires first.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting because, as you mentioned, like you said, Chuck Jones is a leftist, essentially, right? But his vision of Bugs Bunny was essentially as a counter-revolutionary, or as like a, I mean, I hesitate to say conservative's not the right framing, but counter-revolutionary, right? He's minding his own business. Somebody comes along and disturbs him. That's when he goes to war. So in a
Yeah.
strange way, like he's all of us, because that is us versus the left, Red Hawk. We're minding our
Yeah.
own business, and these buggers punch us in the face, and so that makes Bugs Bunny very easy to relate to in a strange way in the Chuck Jones version. He also likes pitting him, even though he has the famous ones with Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck. He loves pitting him against like huge villains. Like there's that one with the boxer that you mentioned. There's a there's a one in a haunted house I seem to remember against some massive like.
Yeah, there's like some like Count Dracula kind of character, and then there's also like a big red monster, Gossamer, that he faces off against. But yeah, it's always like some guy who's much bigger than himself. He's minding his own business, and he just through his trickery and outsmarting him, he always gets a number on him.
Yeah, you can see it's kind of summed up by this. This is from Alibaba Bunny here, but you can see this is some like Arab here. There's Bugs, inflappable as ever. He is going to come out on top. He's a smart ass. He's a bit of a deadpan snarker, you might say.
Yeah, his irrational self-confidence. Yeah.
But essentially, he's a counter-revolutionary force, which is kind of interesting in the Chuck Jones version. Then in the Fritz Frieling version of Bugs, it's much more a kind of game of battleships, basically, with Yosemite Sam, right? So
Yeah.
Yosemite Sam apparently is modeled after Fritz Frieling himself. Like he had red hair, he had a bad temper, he had a mustache, he was short, all of which Fritz Frieling was. But if you watch those ones, often like there's one I remember where they've got a fort each, and they're like blasting cannons at each other. It's very much like battleships or chess, or it's a duel of wits, something like that.
Yeah, Bugs has a much more active role in the Fritz Frieling cartoons, with either getting revenge or striking first, or actually putting him in situations to go and fight. So it's not so much like the other guy striking first. It's much more like Bugs is going to teach this guy a lesson. There's a lot of like Old West ones where Bugs like actively like will challenge Yosemite Sam to a gunfight, because he's like just sick of his shit, basically. So
there's a brilliant one where they're running for mayor. Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
that's fucking brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I think he keeps on giving him booby trap cigars and stuff like
that.
That's great. And then McKimson also is bashing out Bugs ones as well. I can't really remember. I think Bugs is a bit more of like I guess an everyman in the McKimson ones.
There's a lot of McKimson ones where he directs where Bugs is just, he's caught in like a love triangle between like another rabbit and like this cute like girl bunny rabbit, or Bugs is, a fallen victim of like a construction company or highway patrol guys. They're trying to build like a highway through his, rabbit hole or something, or like the Tasmanian devil comes running around or something. So yeah, it's not so much like Jones where he's fallen victim to something, but it's more like, he's just the everyday guy who wants to keep his house intact. Or McKimson directed like the ones with Rocky and Muggsy, like mobsters that come and kidnap Bugs, basically. So yeah, and McKimson does a lot more of like the wily, wordplay ones, with Bugs. It's not so much like slapstick. It's more like oh, I'm just gonna, be really, really witty and make fun of these guys.
I'm trying to think of the best way to proceed, Red Hawk, and I'm actually thinking that it might be an idea just to go through. Wikipedia has a very comprehensive list of every single short. I wonder if it's worth just going through the 50s, unless there are any from the late 40s that you think are worth mentioning. I reckon if we just go through the 50s, we could probably stop on good ones, or
Yeah.
mention things along the way. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we could probably do that. Yeah, I think that would be a good way of doing it. Even though there are a couple pretty good ones in the 40s, but yeah, we can start with the 50s.
All right, so here we are. I think by 1950, they're all in their groove. There's Freeling doing his Sylvester and Tweety stuff, or already. Look, Kimson, Kimson doing a Daffy and Porky short there. We can see then Joe. Look at Jones's one. He's using an all-star cast in his Sylvester,
Yeah.
Porky, Elmer Fudd, and Daffy Duck all in one. Scarlet Pimpernel.
Yeah, that short is a play on Robin Hood, Daffy Duck is Robin Hood basically, and that's what the short is based off of. And Sylvester plays what the hell is it, the lawman. Why is his name escaping me right now? But yeah.
And I'll just mention, by the way, from the 40s, one little trilogy of cartoons that is quite good. I think they're Tex Avery ones, but are Bugs Bunny versus that tortoise.
Yeah, Tortoise beats hare and stuff. Yeah. It's very rare that Bugs Bunny, takes losses, but in that trilogy of a tortoise versus the
I think
hare,
he takes 3 L's against the tortoise.
he takes 3 L's, which is interesting, because for the rest of his career, basically, Bugs takes almost 0 L's for the rest of the time. But in the early days,
because he can't handle it. He can't handle the L. It's just, and he comes up with all sorts of ways to try to beat the tortoise, and you just can't do it. I don't know. That's a kind of, they stick out because they're quite different. Those 3, where the tortoise is his name Cyril or something, Cedric the tortoise.
Cecil, Cecil Twiddle, yeah.
All right. What about Beaky Buzzard? While we probably won't talk about him again. This strange character here. What do you think about Beaky Buzzard? He doesn't crop up that often.
Yeah, he had only a handful of shorts. He wasn't around for a very long time. He was kind of like a country yokel kind of character. He had a southern accent. And he was just a really dumb character that at this time they were still trying to figure out who they could put up against Bugs. And they were like, oh well, how about we put him in the American West and we give this turkey vulture, throw him in there and see what he can do.
He is unbelievably stupid, isn't he?
Yeah, really, really dumb character.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that as a Bugs foil? Because it seems to me that Bugs needs to be up against someone who's going to give him a run for his money, and
he does. Yeah, he does much better with someone who's kind of on his intellectual level, where he's just one level higher, with the word gags and stuff, which is why Daffy Duck works so well with him. So they just have snappy pronoun trouble with word play, and he just gets one over on them. It definitely hits home much more than one of these ridiculous Beaky Buzzard ones where the guy can barely talk.
There's Yosemite Sam Freeling. Almost. Does anybody else ever use Yosemite Sam, or is it always Freeling?
Yeah. Chuck Jones uses them a handful of times. One of the Academy Award winning shorts that they won with Nighty Night Bugs. Yeah, that's what it's called. That was a Chuck Jones directed one, I think. But yeah, most all of them are Freeling ones with Yosemite Sam.
Yeah. While we're on the subject, any Yosemite Sam Bugs ones stick out to you? The one where they're in forts. There's one where they're in medieval Bugs is like a kind of jester in the court or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, that's 90 Night Bugs I was just referring to, and that one won an Academy Award, and it's got some pretty hilarious, humor in that one. Yeah, so Yosemite Sam is the Black Knight trying to foil like King Arthur's plans, and Bugs tries to go in and get a sword back, and of course, a bunch of comedy ensues with that one. The one you got on the screen here, Big House Bunny, is kind of funny. Like Bugs just is trying to escape a bunch of hunters, and he accidentally burrows his way inside a prison, and Yosemite Sam is a prison guard in there. So there's a lot of like snappy wordplay in that one. Freeling was one of the guys that really pioneered the Bugs being like a smartass and like weaseling his way out of situations with just his words. And then like Jones ended up picking it up, but Freeling was really the guy that started it. Beforehand, Jones was having Bugs do a bunch of, like gags with like sticks of dynamite and stuff like that and getting one over on people. But Freeling was really the one who was like, okay, we're going to make Bugs like, a really, really smart ass.
While we're talking about these Yosemite Sam shorts, something else has just occurred to me as well, which is that one of the interesting things, if you watch some of the older ones, especially in the late 30s, early 40s, the backgrounds were a lot more detailed and realistic in the older cartoons, and as time goes on, they become a lot more stripped down, almost abstract at times. That was a deliberate choice on the part of it. Wasn't like a budget cut or anything. They deliberately wanted this more kind of pared back idea where there's very little scenery, there's very little setting. Even in these themed Yosemite Sam ones, you'll see the outline of a town or something, but it's just kind of suggested. It's almost like impressionistic in a way. I find that really interesting that because it makes them a lot more artistic in a strange way.
Yeah, it's
the one that
interesting
always
too.
stands,
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the one that always stands out to me is because it was on a lot when I was a kid. When I used to watch it on TV, when they in this country they just come on randomly before the news. Often it would just be used to fill like 5 minutes of TV. They haven't got anything else on. Stick it on before the weather or something like that. It's the one where Bugs is like in a bullfight. He's a
Oh yeah. Bully for Bugs. Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
a Chuck Jones one.
It's a Chuck Jones one. It's famous. But if you look at the background and it's all so spare, so the suggestion of an audience, okay, they're kind of in a stadium or something. There's one in the circus as well, which is like that. And I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing to think about, that they deliberately went away from realism and towards that. So it's very much in the Roadrunner cartoons as well.
Oh yeah. I think that's where it's the most stark. It's just a single background that they use. The idea is always the same. It's like the American Southwest, like the Grand Canyon area or something like that. Not much else going on in the background, and you can kind of. It's interesting when you go back and watch them because you could see the parts of the screen that are, like that look a little bit more animated. That like in a future point in the short that's going to be used by some character, like some character's going to pick it up, like if like a candlestick that they use to like bash somebody over the head with, like just looks a little bit more realistic than what is right next to it in the background. That some character is going to go ahead and pick that thing up in a future scene here. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Then there's Foghorn Leghorn cropping up
Yeah.
under McKimpson. Do you like Foghorn Leghorn?
Yeah, it's he was always my dad's favorite character, so we would grow up and watch a lot of like Foghorn stuff. He's very interesting. He's like very Southern American, in his mannerisms and everything. He goes around singing camp down races all the time, and he's got a very interesting, like Southern twang kind of to his accent. And he's always, he's a Foghorn Leghorn, so he famously talks a lot. He's very, very loud. And he's a funny guy. He's got some good shorts.
I like the one. Am I remembering this right? Does he have like a little son or something, like it was some youngster he's trying to show the ropes. Trying to remember which one that was, but I kind of like him when he's trying to explain something to someone else like that, 'cause
Yeah, he's got like a couple scenes or a couple shorts where he like takes like a kind of like a nerd, like other barnyard chicken. He's trying to teach him how to play like, cops and robbers or something, or play soldier or something. And he's constantly being foiled by this kid, who is really, really good at like equations and knows perfectly how to, like win at bowling or something. And Foghorn just, is always run afoul of, some little kid showing him what's up. Kind of a
Now,
goofy character.
given that I have you on here, Red Hawk, do you think it's fair to say that if any of the Looney Tunes characters were going to go, MGTOW or PUA, I reckon it would, maybe not PUA, but I reckon Foghorn Leghorn is the most likely to become a men's activist of all the characters.
Yeah, there's a couple shorts where, like Foghorn is homeless and he tries to pick up like a prissy hen to, like stay inside her house like for cold winters and stuff like that. And, he kind of fulfills the stereotype of like the lonely drifter, and there's definitely some funny moments in there.
I think probably Pepe Le Pew would be the PUA, wouldn't he? But Foghorn Leghorn would be the big toe. So, all right. What else? That's a strange one. Look, Porky Pig and Miss Prissy. I don't remember that one, but
yeah, I'm not familiar with that either.
That's a famous one. What's up, Doc? Al Johnson, isn't it?
Yeah. Bing Crosby. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just going to go through a bit more. Yeah.
The Ducksters. That's a pretty famous one that Jones directed, where Porky Pig and Daffy Duck is a game show host for like a terrestrial radio show. Again, this is like when they partner Porky and Daffy up a lot together in this age. And Porky's like the game show contestant, and that one's a pretty hilarious short, because like the questions are completely absurd, and Daffy Duck is dropping like anvils on him and stuff when he gets the questions wrong, and it's a funny one. And that one also breaks the fourth wall. There was this thing. Another thing that you guys got to remember is that these shorts were made for theaters and studio audiences. So there were multiple occasions where they would break the fourth wall and directly address like characters. Characters would address people in the audience. It's like, lady in the upper balcony. Do you have a doctor in the house? And like somebody would stand up or something like that. So they did a lot of these like breaking the fourth wall stuff. And there was that a little bit in the Ducksters. Bunker Hill Bunny, that's what you're referring to when Yosemite Sam and Bugs are opposing each other in a fort, in the American Revolution.
Yeah, there's Sylvester tweeted, Granny has come in at this point as well. Mike the Bulldog, he's a character who is he the big dog who always gets into it with Sylvester?
Yeah, there's a couple of those, and he's got a sidekick, Chester Terrier. Yeah, there was a couple of those.
Well, that's another McKimson thing, the hippity hopper, very little known character, but he crops up in the Sylvester stories that McKimson does as well. Sylvester, while we're on the subject of him, Did you say that he is in the most Oscar-winning shorts or something?
Yeah, of the 5 Oscars that they won, he's in 3 of them.
Wow.
Bugs Bunny's in one of them. Pepe Le Pew's in the other one. But yeah, so Daffy Duck never won one. Yeah, Elmer Fudd never won one. It was Sylvester was in 3
Sylvester,
of them.
3-time Oscar winner.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing, okay? When it's Roadrunner versus Wile E. Coyote, I think you'd agree with me that basically everybody is on Wile E. Coyote's side. I mean, even as a kid, I was 100% Team Coyote. You just want to see him succeed once, right?
Yeah, and that was like one of the rules that we can get into that too when we get to Wile E. Coyote that Jones had, is that the coyote is the victim of bad luck more so to the lack of his own skill in most circumstances, and that you're supposed to sympathize with him a bunch. The Roadrunner like never talks. He never is like actively, mean to like Wiley. He's literally just does nothing but run on the road. It's literally it. It's all he does. And it's just like the contraptions like from Acme that are always like breaking down. It's not necessarily Wiley's fault. So yeah, you're definitely supposed to sympathize with them.
Now, I've been watching a lot of these Sylvester cartoons with AAA recently. And Sylvester, I mean, I don't want to sound like a shitlib, but he probably needs like to see somebody. Like he needs therapy. Like he is desperate. He is obsessive. He is really got a spiteful, mean streak in him.
Yeah. And one of the Oscar winners, Birds Anonymous, he goes to like a kind of like a pussycat like self-help group, basically like a pussycat version of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he tries to give up on chasing Tweety Bird, and then by the end of the short he relapses and goes back to it. But there's funny scenes where he's like just walking around and he'll casually like turn on the radio and like Bye Bye Blackbird comes on and he like relapses, or he turns on the TV like a Thanksgiving dinner is shown and he relapses again. And yeah, that one won an Oscar. So
I mean, he's not just he's tragic, but he's also like, how can I say, like they always make him slightly unsympathetic as well. Like you can't. I feel like Sylvester's nasty enough that you don't root for him always. And I hate Tweety Pie, by the way. I never side with Tweety Pie, but I think Sylvester's just so much of a bastard that you can't really side with him.
Yeah, he's always going to pick on Tweety, no matter what Tweety's up to. He's just singing in his birdcage or on exhibit at a zoo, and Sylvester just can't stop himself.
There's one where it's Christmas time, right? And there's this mouse. I think it's a mouse, and maybe a dog. And Sylvester wants to live in this house. Like he wants to be kept by, I think it's by Granny. I could be remembering this wrong. No, I think it's by Elmer Fudd.
Yeah.
Elmer Fudd owns a mansion, and it's Christmas time. Sylvester wants to live in his house, but he has to outcompete two other animals for affection. It's so dark. It's just really dark.
Yeah, and one of them's like a kitten, and Sylvester's like digging up like traps, like to drop an anvil on this poor little kitten's head or something like that. And it's
There's also one. Tell me if I remember this wrong. There's one. I think it's again a mouse wants to commit suicide, or a bird wants to commit suicide.
Yeah, there is one like and Sylvester thinks the bird is poisoned because like it fell in like a can of paint, so it's like blue, and Sylvester thinks it's a poisonous bird. But throughout the entire short, like the bird will like drop like a mallet on Sylvester's foot, and then he screams and the bird just flies into his mouth. Yeah.
This is the irony. This poor Sylvester can't eat a single bird for hundreds of cartoons now, and just this one actively wants to be eaten, and he's having none of it. So
and there's famously Sylvester is also the put up against Speedy Gonzalez a bunch, and so he tries really, really hard to protect this cheese factory from all these mice, and Speedy Gonzalez just beats the shit out of him every single time.
There's one where it's a Tweety Pie one, right? But there's a yard full of dogs.
Oh yeah, one of the all-time greats. Yeah, for sure.
So good. But no matter how many times Sylvester kind of comes a cropper, is almost suicidal, he still won't give up. He still, it doesn't matter how many times, he'll just carry on, relentless.
So there's one short that got an Oscar nomination that Freeling directed, but it didn't get it. It's called Canned Feud, and Sylvester is a house cat, and the family goes on vacation, and they accidentally lock him in the house for 2 weeks, and Sylvester's freaking out because he can't get outside the house and he's going to starve. and he opens the cabinets and finds like a whole stack of like canned food and stuff. So he's gonna be fine. But when he goes to look in the the utilities drawer in the silverware, he can't find a can opener, and there's a mouse in the house that has stolen the can opener, and the rest of the short is Sylvester trying desperately to get the can opener from this mouse, and it's absolutely hilarious because at the very end of the short, he ends up sticking TNT in the wall of the house. It just blows up the house, and he grabs the can opener, only to find that the mouse has now put a padlock on the cabinet, so he can't open it. And the mouse whistles at him and pulls out a key, and Sylvester just faints, just like screams out in terror.
It's only just occurred to me that Sylvester is a prototype for the stereotypical John Cleese character. Like I don't know if you've ever seen Fawlty Towers. There's a film that John Cleese was in called Clockwise in the 80s, which is right. It's the whole film is just John Cleese plays this headmaster or teacher or something. He has to go and give a speech, right? But the whole film is just him being frustrated. Like all he has to do is get from A to B, and everything goes wrong. Everything stops him, and it's so frustrating. And Sylvester is that character. He is always, of course, something, of course a mouse would have stolen the fucking can opener,
Yeah, he really just is a character that can't get a win. So I think Sylvester, like even more than anybody else, I don't think he ever gets a win like in anything.
There's one I watched recently with AAA. Sorry about the names. I'm not very good at remembering the individual titles, but there's one where Granny's going away and he's left in the house with Tweety Pie, right? Opens the cupboard, birdseed. No.
Oh yeah.
No, and I was watching with AAA. I screamed at the TV. Why didn't you leave him some cat food? I mean, for God's sake! I mean, just leave him in the house with no food and Tweety Pie. Brilliant, Granny. Anyway, let's carry on going. Elmer Fudd still makes occasional appearances as well.
Yeah, there's that one I was talking about earlier, Rabbit of Seville. Yeah, that one's a must see. As far as it relates to Bugs and Elmer ones, that one is perfect. Musically, everything.
Then let's have a look what else we got here. See, they still do like one-offs as well, like Fox in a Fix. This is just like Fox.
There's still like some stinkers. They still try to develop new characters and stuff, but a lot of them just don't stick, and they end up going back to old ones. So
there's that one you were talking about just now, canned food.
Yeah. That one's really, really dark. Sylvester is trying so hard just to make sure he doesn't starve to death, and this stupid mouse, just steals the can opener.
I tell you what else I like about Sylvester. Sylvester tends to be in very kind of domestic, kind of mid-century settings. I love my mid-century furniture and stuff like that. I don't know, you just get, there are always just kind of urban environments and things like that. So I kind of dig them for that reason as well. Okay, let's carry on. Pepe Le Pew, there he is. Is that the one that won?
No. Sentimental Reasons is the one that won.
Oh, it's the Sentimental Romeo, right?
Yeah. They were all like plays on scent, but yeah, it was the third Pepe Le Pew short, and this was a Chuck Jones character, but he finally found his stride with the third short, and that's the one that won the Oscar. So I guess we could summarize pretty much all these shorts are exactly the same. There's a female cat that somehow gets a white paint poured on her to make her look like a skunk, and Pepe Le Pew just immediately starts chasing after her, immediately trying to do a cold approach, and fails spectacularly.
I mean, Pepe Le Pew has become problematic, as leftists say, in this day and age. Is he banned from TV? Is he
Yeah, I do remember he was cut from the new Space Jam movie where the Looney Tunes characters are coming back because he's against the woman, as it were. But one of the things that Jones always said was one of the rules with Pepe Le Pew is that at the end of every single one of the shorts he's in, the table is always turned on him. So somehow the pussycat that he's chasing somehow turns the tables on him, no matter what it is, whether it's like in the famous one, Sentimental Reasons, at the end of the short, Pepe Le Pew falls into a vat of perfume. So his scent, so his scent is eliminated, and the pussycat, like starts chasing after him. And then like when the tables are turned on him, he just starts immediately running away. He's like, oh no, I don't like this. So
yeah, or it'll be his stripe is painted over, or and he doesn't like it up him, does he? He doesn't like the woman. He wants to be the chaser. He doesn't like to be chased. Pepe Le Pew. So I mean, as a PUA, how do you give Pepe Le Pew marks out of 10? He just
needs some cologne. He needs some cologne, and then needs to know when to give up. But in that famous short where he wins, like he does some serious, some serious mental tricks there. In the famous one where he wins the Oscar, the pussycat traps herself in like a glass container. And then Pepe Le Pew, to get her to come outside, he points a gun at his own head and then walks off screen and pulls the trigger like he's faking to commit suicide. And the pussycat runs outside. He's like, I missed. Fortunately for you, my dear. He just grabs her again.
Then a couple of Goofy Gophers. Now, I watched a few of those, and I have not enjoyed them.
Yeah, they stuck around like for a little bit. In the later years, they put them against Daffy Duck again, and Daffy Duck tried to foil them. They were like, I guess there's like tier 1 characters, and these guys are tier 2. They didn't really break out in the mainstream, but they were around like for maybe like 10 shorts, so they're still around. I guess I would classify people like Sam Sheepdog and Ralph Wolf, famous Chuck Jones characters, in like those tier 2 levels as well. And that was like a different take on like the classic Chase cartoon, but these guys are just like blue collar workers, and it's literally just their job to guard the sheep. And then Ralph Wolf's job is just to try and grab the sheep. It's literally just their jobs. Again, like breaking the fourth wall.
I didn't realize that Ralph and Wile E. Coyote are basically identical, apart from they're like one of them's got yellow eyes and the other one's got white eyes.
Yeah, they're very similar.
So there's another famous part of the hunting trilogy you mentioned, Rabbit Fire.
Yeah, that's the first one. Yeah, Rabbit Fire.
I mean, brilliant. The dynamic between those three, Bugs, Daffy, and Elmer, is, just really good. I like the three-way thing. I have to say, Mrs. AA had concerns watching that with AAA, that how many times Daffy Duck gets his beak shot in those ones.
It happens a lot. Yeah. Well, again, like that started like the trope, and I mean, it's definitely different over here in America, because like there's a really, really big hunting culture over here and a really big gun culture as well. So it was like goofy to see like, oh, you just get shot with a gun and you just get a little bit of soot on your face, like a gunshot's supposed to set you on fire and stuff. That's another trope, like in the cartoons, which is interesting.
It's more tweety stuff. Hector, that's the name of that dog, isn't it? The big dog.
Hector the dog. Yeah.
Is that the one with the dog pit? That one.
Yeah, and they just like clone him 47 times. There's like 47 bulldogs in there.
Yeah. No, this is the one where they sneak into the hotel.
Yeah.
Hector's got a different owner. Or Sylvester's got a different owner, and they each get checked into a room at the hotel, and there are no pets allowed. So there's this kind of hotel guard who comes in. It's kind of an interesting one, actually. Let's have a look. There's a rare Porky solo in it. Not familiar with that one. Cheese Chasers. There's Miss Prissy.
Yep. Prissy Hen.
Drip Along Daffy. That was one of the ones you sent me to watch.
Yeah. I sent you a pretty long list of shorts that are really good ones. I might end up tweeting that link out if anyone wants to take a look at it. But yeah, that's one where like we were talking about before, how Porky Pig is often like paired with Daffy, and he's the sidekick, but he's actually competent, and Daffy's the one that's constantly getting foiled. Yeah, that's another one, Old West one where Porky Pig is the one that ended up saving the day, and Daffy Duck is just, a goofball.
There's the one in the circus, I think. The Big Top Bunny. What? More hippity hopper action.
Yeah, with Sylvester Jr. Again, how we were talking about how Sylvester just can't get a win. He's constantly being embarrassed in front of his son, like just really dark stuff.
Just dark. It really is dark. What about this interesting pairing? Bugs and Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, so there were maybe 5 or 6 of these that they came out with, all directed by Jones, of course, because Wile E. Coyote was his character. But it's a rare speaking role that Wile E. has. He only speaks in these Bugs Bunny ones, and they're actually pretty hilarious, because it's another good, like mental judo, basically back and forth between the two of them. Because like Wile E. Coyote, basically like pulls out like a business card and tries like, basically cut right to the chase. He's like, okay, listen, my name is Wile E. Coyote. I'm a super genius. We could play this game all day that we want, but I'm a coyote and you're a rabbit and I'm going to eat you. Now don't try to get away. He just tries to rationalize with Bugs, and Bugs just isn't having any of it. Yeah, those are actually some really, really good ones. Lesser known ones, but yeah, people should definitely watch those.
Yeah, no, I think. Do you think it's fair to say there's an element of Chuck Jones's personality in Wile E. Coyote? Because obviously, like a frustrated genius, like kind of.
Yeah.
Because he is obviously like genius level intellect, but nothing ever goes his way. He's frustrated against the world. There is also this one of my all-time favorites, and in fact, I think the short I watched that triggered this whole show, Red Hawk, was I tweeted it out, and you immediately said, "Oh, if you ever do a show on this, I want to come on." And that is Feed the Kitty. It's another Chuck Jones one.
Yeah,
I really love
solo
this.
outing. Yeah.
It's this big dog and this little kitten. Initially, he wants to kind of try to eat the kitten, but over the course of the show, he kind of becomes fond of it and starts looking after it. It's just really nice little 7-minute short.
Oh yeah. It's a heartwarming one, and I think they only had like 2, maybe 3 with these characters, but yeah, like they were still making their shorts with like the established characters at this point, but they each had like little one-offs. Yeah, so Chuck Jones was like, yeah, you know what, I think this will be a nice idea. So this big giant hulking bulldog, and then like this little innocent kitten, and I have to hide it from my owner and basically adopt it and start taking care of it. Yeah, it's a good one for sure.
I feel like this one should have won an award or something. I don't think it did, but
it got nominated, but it did not win. No.
I'm just looking it up now. It's in 1994 it was voted the 36th greatest cartoon of all time in the top 50 by Jerry Beck. So by members of the animation field. So in 1994 they did a 50 greatest cartoons, but a book that came out and all the people voted on it. And this came 36th, just to give you an idea. Just looking to see what was number 1.
Probably What's Opera Doc.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It was What's Opera Doc.
Yeah, very, very good one.
So, yeah, maybe I'll track down that. Maybe I'll track down that book. See what's in that top 50. All right, let's carry on. What else have we got here? Is that same kitten, or is that a different kitten? That's not.
No, it'll be a different one.
Yeah, because that kitten's called Pussyfoot, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Rudolph. There's that big monster. He's called Rudolph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was a good one too. Yeah. Here we go with some of our Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner ones that are making their appearance.
Yeah, should we talk about Roadrunner?
Yeah.
Let's talk about all the Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote. So, I mean, these are brilliant, obviously. I don't know if they're my favorite, but they might be. If I was really forced, like, which ones do I have to keep? You have to keep some, get rid of all the others. I may end up keeping Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote.
They were definitely my
Just-
favorite when I was a kid, for sure. They were absolutely my favorite. I think now I've grown more fond of like a lot of like the verbal judo ones, or something like maybe Duck Amuck, which we'll get to at some point. You know, just because like how brilliant it is and how unique it is. But definitely when I was a kid, these were my favorites. Again, we were talking about like Carl Stalling earlier. Like these ones with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, famously, there's zero dialogue in any of these. It's just music, and the music really sets the tone perfectly. You know, for so many of these scenes, like the emotions conveyed, the animation. Yeah, these are really really good ones.
Shall I pull up the rules, the famous rules that Chuck Jones came up with for these?
Yeah, there were like
I-
10 of them, right? Yeah.
Well, let me pull them up here, because here we are. Rule 1: the Roadrunner cannot harm the coyote except by going meep meep meep. Rule 2: no outside force can harm the coyote, only his own ineptitude or the failure of the Acme products. I mean, try Amazon, mate. Rule 3: the coyote could stop anytime if he were not a fanatic. Repeat, a fanatic is one who redoubles his effort when he has forgotten his aim. So there we go. Rule 4: no dialogue ever except meep meep. Rule 5: the Roadrunner must stay on the road. Otherwise, logically, he would not be called Roadrunner. Rule 6: all action must be confined to the natural environment of the two characters, the Southwest American desert. And it's Arizona specifically, isn't it?
Yeah, and the background is pretty much perfect if you ever go to that part of the country. And yes, indeed, roadrunners and coyotes are real animals. They are, you know, natural adversaries in the real world. So it's not you know, I mean, it's taken to the extreme because roadrunners literally faster than a bullet, but they are very very fast birds. So
I tell you what's funny. I've been to Arizona, and it's incredible how much like the background in Roadrunner Arizona is in real life.
yeah, all like the Red Rock canyons and everything.
Yeah,
and,
it really is like that. Like really
Yeah.
is like that. And I was like, I've been here before. Oh yes, every Star Trek I've ever watched, and Roadrunner, of course. Rule 7: all materials, tools, weapons, or mechanical conveniences must be obtained from the Acme Corporation. Rule 8: whenever possible, make gravity the coyote's greatest enemy.
Mhm.
How many times does he do that one where he paints the tunnel on the rock? Roadrunner goes straight through. Coyote
he-
straight into the wall
Yeah, he
every
tries to
time.
imitate, he runs through. Yeah, or how many times does he have like you know, like a seesaw, or like try to make something into a catapult or something, and gravity just completely doesn't work, you know, and screws him over.
There's one I was watching with AAA a couple of weeks back, where there's that big mountain and he's on the little ledge, right? Roadrunner's on the ledge, and then the entire mountain falls.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just stuff like that.
Yeah, he's trying to like, you know, cut him off the edge like with a saw, and everything behind him falls down, you know.
Just and then rule 9: the coyote is always more humiliated than harmed by his failures, and that keeps him kind of a sympathetic character. I think we're meant to be on his side, aren't we?
Yeah. You're definitely meant to be on like the coyote side. I mean, which kind of makes sense because the Roadrunner basically has like no character to him. He only has like one line of dialogue the whole time. He's basically like actually never on screen just because he's moving so fast, you know. So it's the camera's almost always on Wile E, you know, working with some kind of contraption or something and failing spectacularly every single time.
I tell you what else is quite fun about the Wile E. Coyote is the kind of intricacy of his schemes, his plans and his.
Yeah,
I don't know. As someone who plays Dwarf Fortress, that kind of appeals to me. That element of it.
Yeah, he draws up like these really intricate like blueprints and everything with like math equations and everything, doing all the work possible to make sure nothing, you know, screws up, but of course it does.
Brilliant. Okay, so then we'll have a look at some others. Marvin the Martian. We haven't talked about him.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
crops
He was a Jones character he created. Yeah, he was maybe 6 or 7 shorts, and you know, there are a couple really really famous ones for sure. And like yeah, so he's like the Martian character that whenever one of the characters, whether it's Bugs or Daffy, goes into space, he's the guy that they go up against, and he's very interesting design. He's got no mouth, which is very very strange. So he's supposed to look really otherworldly. And he's always really, really grumpy, and he just wants to, destroy the Earth somehow, whether it's like with a big giant laser or something like that. And Bugs and Daffy are unwittingly put up against him, and they got to foil him. But yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Then we have yeah. There's here's another, like they occasionally do fairy tales. Here's Big Bad Wolf and Three Little
Yeah,
Pigs, more of a staple of the earlier of the previous decade, I would say. But like I was saying, McKimson, the reactionary, continuing the old traditions, like just banging out
mhm.
another fairy tale there. So
Yeah, they had a couple where Bugs was like against like Goldilocks and the Three Bears and stuff like that. They did a couple of those. Ain't She Tweet is what you were talking about earlier when they have the whole yard full of dogs that
oh
Sylvester has
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
past. Yeah, yeah, and of course he fails spectacularly in that.
Well,
Um,
in the Golden Collection, you see, they just stick them all on one disc. So
mhm.
it's just like, well, I've 1 hour with AAA. I was like, well, okay, I've watched like all of the most famous Tweety Pie ones in one afternoon.
Yeah,
So
yeah, pretty much.
um,
This next one here, Cracked Quack, is kind of interesting. Like Daffy again, paired with Porky Pig, but in this one, Daffy's trying to weasel his way out of flying south for the winter, and so he sees a stuffed canvasback duck in like Porky Pig's trophy room, and so he hides the duck, and then for the rest of the winter, he just stands there in place of the duck, the taxidermy duck, and there's some pretty funny gags dealt with in that one.
then we've got oily Texas Oil Tycoon. That one doesn't. I haven't watched that. I've got it. Look, it's on disc. It's on disc 1 of Volume 5, but I
Mm.
haven't watched that one yet. Just very quickly on the kind of fairy tale ones. They are these days, you'd say, quite postmodern in a way. They very rarely kind of give you the fairy tale straight up. The fairy tales are always getting invaded by other fairy tales, or like the Big Bad Wolf keeps on switching between his Three Little Pigs version and his Little Red Riding Hood version.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
they do a lot of pop culture stuff too. Like there's one where they did like the Three Little Pigs, and they're like a jazz band, and like the Big Bad Wolf is like a rival like jazz musician, and he gets really pissed at him, and that's where it starts. And they do like Little Red Riding Hood ones, and like Little Red Riding Hood's driving around in like a jalopy or something instead of walking through the woods. So yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with these.
what else have we got? Yeah, more Tweety. So you can kind of see the pattern. I'm just going to stop on, say stop if you see anything of interest. I'm going to scroll through, otherwise we'll be. There's Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog. I have to say, AAA has found these ones in particular hilarious. The ones where she's really like properly laughed have been these ones for some reason. I don't know why that is. I think it's because there's quite a lot of hiding in them. Toddlers just love hiding. They love they get cracked up by the idea of somebody hiding, and he's always hiding in like, I don't know, like a tree or under, disguising himself as a sheep or whatever else it is. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think those guys are pretty relatable too, because they always like take lunch breaks together like during the short, and they're shown to be like pretty good friends, even though, Sam's sheepdog is literally, beating the crap out of, Ralph Wolf in the other scenes. So yeah, very interesting take. And again, just showing Chuck Jones's genius.
yeah, clocking in and clocking out. That's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. What else have we got? So there's a follow-up of Mark Antony and Pussyfoot. I don't think I've seen that one yet.
Yeah, I think they did like maybe 3 or 4 of them, but it was kind of like the same trope, like over and over again. You got to remember, like, guys in the chat, like when these things first came out, they were kind of like one shots. Like they put them up in theaters. It's not like they were syndicated on television at the time or were on like DVD and stuff. So they used a lot of like the same gags and a lot of like the same like dialogue and stuff. And if you like ever go on like a binge and like go and binge like all Yosemite Sam stuff, you'll see him use like the same lines, like multiple times over. And several of the same gags, and sometimes they even use like very, very similar shots, So yeah, they if someone was, if something was working, then if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have to talk about Duck Amuck though.
Yeah, this is another really famous one.
Yeah, extremely famous. This one's in, the National Film Registry in America that I was talking about earlier. And this one, probably more than all the other shorts, breaks the fourth wall. It's literally just Daffy Duck facing off against, what is a cartoon animator. And, there's a pencil going on all over the scene, just like drawing different scenery and different, things going on, and Daffy Duck is just trying to do his job. And of course, the joke at the end of the cartoon is that it's Bugs Bunny who's been drawing, the background the entire time and screwing around with Daffy.
There it is, like there is fighting against the pencil and so on. Well, what's really interesting about this is that until that reveal, it's like he's fighting against Chuck Jones himself.
Yeah.
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Daffy's like constantly talking to the animator, basically telling him, how my job should be done. And, this is an animated cartoon and we need to have a scenery. He's just yelling at him. And, Jones, when he did an interview about this one, what he really wanted to show is that Daffy Duck is Daffy Duck no matter what. He draws him as like, a ridiculous, caricature of himself. One scene, he takes away his mouth so he can't talk, but just throughout the animations and the music in the background, you just know this is Daffy Duck, no matter what's happening.
It's absolutely brilliant. Did you say he returns to this idea later on?
Yeah. He does a repeat of this where Bugs Bunny is the victim of this in 1955. And the gag at the end of that one is that Elmer Fudd is the animator. So it's another very rare point where Bugs takes an L. But yeah, so almost the exact same short, frame for frame, but it's, I actually think that one's actually funnier just because it's Bugs Bunny taking an L, but Duck Amuck is, really, really special.
Yeah, I think Chuck Jones is really good as a Daffy director. He just knows how to use that character. And I don't know, it's brilliant. It really is. That Duck Amuck is like a top 5 for me, I would say. I mean, not that I've made a top 5 or anything, but it stands out.
It absolutely would be in my top 5 if I was to make
I really like that Feed the Kitty as well, though. So that would be in my top 5 too. But yeah, Duck Amuck is definitely up there. Let's keep on going. More Yosemite Sam. Where's that one? Okay.
Yeah, that one's actually a really good one. Southern Fried Rabbit is Bugs Bunny is a Union soldier and Yosemite Sam is a Confederate, and they actually have a bunch of Confederate flags in the shots. And at one point, this short has since been banned because you can't get away with this now. But Bugs Bunny dresses up as a slave, to sneak across into enemy lines, and there's a bunch of yeah. So if you could find this short, which you can if you Google it, I have watched it, so it is out there somewhere, but it has been banned. But yeah, it's pretty funny. And then, so Bugs dresses up as a slave, and then in the same gag, he dresses up as Abe Lincoln to try and get a one-over on Yosemite Sam. So it's a pretty funny one.
They actually did something pretty based on the Golden Collection, which I've got, which is that literally they just put like Whoopi Goldberg on the start, said, yeah, some of this stuff is pretty racially insensitive. Enjoy the show. And that's it. So this, for example, is on there. It's on volume 4. And they saved quite a lot of the, I mean, not the what do they call them, the censored 11 or whatever, the forbidden 11 or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't think they put those ones on there, but there are quite a few like risque ones on there, including this one. So what else? Yeah. This one is brilliant as well. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, that one's a very good one. Yeah, another one where Porky Pig is like the smart sidekick that ends up saving the day because Daffy Duck is totally incompetent and, fooling with Marvin the Martian. But yeah, of course, that one was a play on the 50s TV show Buck Rogers, which was pretty big in
Yeah.
America at the time. So they did a little play on that.
I actually like that one because it just looks great. The set, the sci-fi stuff, it just looks brilliant. What else have we got? The Foghorn Leghorn.
There's Bully for Bugs that we were talking about, where he's the victim of a bull. Yeah, he's the
Oh yes,
matador.
yeah. I mean that's a famous one as well. What
Another
about
one where he's the victim. The bull just decides to ram him when he's trying to look for directions. Of course, that famous line that Jones gave Bugs. That left turn at Albuquerque. Because he's always getting lost.
Here's Speedy? Look, first appearance of Speedy Gonzales in 1953.
Yep, that one won the. Actually, no, this one did not win it. There was one Speedy Gonzales one that ended up winning it that Sylvester was in. I think it was a couple years later.
Speedy is a McKimson creation as well, then.
Yeah, even though Freeling did most of the work with him in the future, but yeah.
Interesting. What else we got?
I'll just quickly mention that one above it, Lumberjack Rabbit. It was the first and only one that was in 3D. So they did the little like a 3D animation on that one, and they had Bugs Bunny dealing with American folklore hero Paul Bunyan. So I mean that one's kind of interesting. It's not other than the fact that it's in 3D. There's nothing really else that's memorable about it.
You know what I love? They have been trying to get 3D over for 70 straight years, and they just haven't managed it still.
Yeah, I mean, it never really caught on.
It never catches on properly, does it?
Well, who wants to wear 3D glasses when you're watching a movie? It's just a pain in the ass. Duck Rabbit Duck is the last of the hunting trilogy. There were 3 of them. They each came out 1 year after the other one. We were mentioning before how it takes about a year to make these things. So once Jones got the green light to use Daffy that way, he made 2 of them year after the other, and all 3 of them are brilliant. So definitely go watch all 3 of those.
And they're almost always classed together. If I had one complaint about the Golden Collection, is that they don't like the trilogy is like on 3 completely different volumes. Really, you'd want them in sequence ideally, but they don't.
Yeah.
Minor quibble, I suppose. But I think they brought out the whole collection again on Blu-ray. It's called the Platinum Collection. So, but I don't know. I've got the golden one.
Yeah, I've still got a bunch of collections on VHS tapes that I grew up with. So one of these days I'm gonna have to upgrade to getting one of these ones on DVD, which is gonna be important too to get them because with the way that things are going right now, these streaming platforms are changing everything. So
get them before they're banned.
Yeah. Another thing, I mean, you're mentioning that you're watching these with AAA, but yeah, people should absolutely be watching these with their kids because like they really are like they're not paused. Like they really aren't like in any way. I mean, like, yeah, there's like violence and stuff going on and things like that, but they're not really like, I don't know. Did you detect any like subversive like elements in these things? I mean, I can't really, I mean, it's.
Oh no, it's not. It's very much just reflective of, America in the 40s and 50s. It's not subversive in my view. I mean, the most you could say is that Bugs has a predilection for dressing up as a girl quite often. As a ruse, always as a ruse, but
yeah.
Characters fall in love with him when he dresses as a hot lady. That's pretty much the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, but you're absolutely safe to be showing these to your kids. I mean, more so than any cartoons on TV these days.
I mean, the only risk really is in the other direction, which is the let's just say the racially insensitive portrayals of Native Americans and black people and things like that. Less so in these ones that we're looking at now, more in the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah,
I would say.
Famously, like the Slazenger Studios were contracted by the United States government to put out like a lot of like anti-German and anti-Japanese ones during the time. But yeah, so obviously those are pretty racially insensitive. But the ones that we're looking at here in like the golden age of animation. Yeah, no, there really isn't any of that.
It's hilarious. The Golden Collection is just like, here are all the racist ones on one disc. Here are all the war ones on one disc. So that they go out of their way to save them. It's kind of based in a strange way. It's kind of like, I don't know why they decided to do that, but I guess the
I'm glad they did.
2000s a different period from now, right?
Yeah, we got lucky that these were restored before the wokesters got a hold of them nowadays. So Bugs and Thugs, that one's another must see. Where he's Rocky and Muggsy, the mobsters.
Brilliant one. That's another brilliant one. Yeah. Dr. Jekyll's Hyde.
Yeah, that one's kind of funny, like a play on Sylvester like drinks some potion that makes him really scary, and he's pulling around with like that bulldog and the terrier. Yeah, first appearance of Tasmanian Devil right here.
There he is, Tasmanian Devil. Oh, there's the little Sylvester son, by the way. We mentioned Egghead Jr.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tasmanian Devil. Again, McKimson, another McKimson original. Now I have to say, given the sort of youngster I was, Red Hawk, I never liked the Tasmanian Devil because I don't like. He was very chaotic, and loud and messy. I know little boys are meant to like stuff like that, but not me. He is quite a formidable opponent for Bugs, though, isn't he?
Yeah. He's like just comically strong, like absurdly strong. Like he could chew his way through anything, like metal or steel or anything. He's supposed to be the world's most dangerous animal. So Bugs just has to use his wit. Kind of like how, like with Beaky Buzzard that we were talking about earlier, like Taz isn't very smart, but he is incredibly strong. So the problem with Beaky Buzzard is that he wasn't strong. He was just absolutely nothing. So at least Bugs has to use his wits, to foil him. So makes him a little bit more of a adversary.
I watched this one recently. Witch Hazel is a character who comes up once in a while.
Back when we were talking about like the childhood shorts, like this is like a play on like the Hansel and Gretel story, So
Chuck Jones, more than any other director, loves to change up the setting. This one's sci-fi, this one's a horror one, this one's he likes to move, especially with Bugs. He likes to move him to exotic locations, I would say, quite often.
Yeah, Jones is the one that gave Bugs the trope that he tunnels around like all over the world. Like he'll end up in Antarctica or the Sahara Desert or Spain or Iran. Like that Alibaba bunny. Short that you were talking about earlier. So yeah, he likes to move Bugs Bunny around a lot.
Yeah, there's one with George Washington and Benjamin Franklin in it. Yankee Doodle Bugs.
Yeah.
What goes on there?
Yeah, that's short. Like Bugs is given this nephew, Clyde, and in this short, like Bugs is kind of giving a history of America. Again, like just showing that these shorts like do reflect the American experience. Like in the 30s, they did way more of these like patriotic ones. Like they did one about the Star Spangled Banner. That Porky Pig was learning about it. There was one.
They were actually contracted by the government, were they? By the U.S. government.
Yeah.
But they still did stuff like that in the 50s as well, occasionally.
Yeah, they did a couple of
them. What else have we got? Who's Ralph Phillips?
I don't know that one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I think I might be familiar with this short. I remember reading about it at one point, but I've never seen it. It was like another Chuck Jones one-off.
It was nominated. This one was nominated for an Oscar this year.
But, yeah. I forget what the gist of it was. I think it was like a school kid or something was learning about something. It was one of those educational shorts.
There's another Ralph Wolf one. Apparently, Wile E. Coyote crops up at the end of that one. Sheep Ahoy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to seek that one out. I don't
Yeah,
remember seeing Wile E. Coyote and Ralph on screen together.
yeah, I'll have to go look that one up.
Maybe they double team. Maybe they both get their heads. Maybe they get. Maybe that's a win for Ralph if Wile E. Coyote's helping him. Doubt it. Carry on. See if Goofy Goofies are still turning up.
All Fouled Up is a good one with Foghorn, and he's constantly paired with this Henry Hawk character who's a chicken hawk, and he's like a little kid who wants to go out and get his first chicken, but he has no idea what chickens are or what they look like. So Foghorn is constantly like pretending to be like other barnyard animals and trying to tell Henry Hawk that the barnyard dog is a chicken, and yeah, so it's a common trope in these Foghorn ones.
Yeah. Yep. Just going to go through. I'll just mention very quickly that the appearance of the stork in a lot of these cartoons was a reference to the baby boom that was going on. Like from
Yeah.
from about 1945 to this period, there are a lot of kids being born.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the boomers, right? But they were like super aware of it at the time. So just as we are aware today that the birth rate is low, they were aware back then that the birth rate was high. Interestingly, let's keep on going. So you can see the pattern. They're just bashing them out. Freeling with the bugs, Chuck Jones with the wild. They're in their holding pattern basically right the way to the end.
Rabbit Rampage is the one I was talking about, where Bugs gets the number done on him, like Duck Amuck style. Or
This is
Elmer
the Duck Amuck Bugs one. Yeah.
Yeah, where Bugs is the victim of Elmer Fudd. So really, really funny one.
Is Sylvester always the speedy enemy then?
Yeah, most always. This is the one that won the Oscar, Speedy Gonzalez. So Sylvester is paired up as Speedy's enemy, and this one won an Oscar.
Is that the one with the cheese factory?
Yeah. Sylvester has to guard the cheese factory, and Speedy keeps running past him. Famously, they tried to take Speedy Gonzalez off air because they thought it was racist, but the Mexican American community were up in arms about it. And it's like, no, we love this guy, and they famously actually put him back on air. So one of the rare occasions when someone got canceled but then brought back.
Do you know what I love about the Speedy cartoons? It's going to sound odd. I love Speedy's Mexican friends. Like the skinny, slow one and the fat one, and he's just, I don't know, I just love the way they talk and stuff. Hilarious. So more so than Speedy himself, who I've never quite warmed to. I don't really like Speedy himself, but I like his crew. If that makes any sense. Yeah, there's that little Red Riding Hood one we were talking about.
Yeah. Roman Legionnaire, very, very good one that Friz Freleng directed with Yosemite Sam and Bugs. They're stuck in the Colosseum in ancient Rome. Friz Freleng was one that Chuck Jones had like Bugs travel around a bunch, but Friz Freleng was really big on Bugs like traveling to different time periods. So there was like one where like Bugs is like in the caveman days, and Elmer Fudd is a caveman. There's one where he's caught in the Roman legions. There's like a World War one, the American West. So Friz Freleng does most of the ones where there's like time traveling Bugs, basically.
Yeah, different themes for him and Yosemite Sam to fight in different settings. Yeah. This is another brilliant one.
Oh yeah, another one-off appearance that Chuck Jones did. This one again was saved in the National Film Registry, and fantastic. Michigan J. Frog, just a one-off character, and it was just so brilliant. This one that Jones directed. Also, zero dialogue in this one except the music that the frog sings, and I'm sure you loved this one, AA, just because of how dark it is. Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, do you want to explain what happens to people?
Yeah, so the gist of this short is that there's some construction worker, blue collar guy who finds a time capsule, and inside this time capsule, there's this singing frog that can, do these amazing, musical numbers and dancing and everything. And this guy thinks to himself, "Oh man, I've made it big now. I'm gonna get this frog to perform, at all these settings." And the frog will only perform for the guy who finds it. So whenever he like takes it to executive studios or anything like that to get the frog to perform, or like rents out a whole theater, and progressively through the show, this guy just basically falls into madness and bankruptcy because he's used all of his money to try and make money off of this frog. And eventually he puts the frog back in the time capsule, and then a guy in 2050 finds the thing again, and the cycle starts all over again. So yeah, very, very dark.
It's just brilliant. I mean, Chuck Jones is on such a monster run here. And it's kind of like a little bit unfair to the other guys because, I mean, Freeling is making like all-time great cartoons here. But Chuck Jones is on the mother of all runs in the 50s here. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
It's just insane how many great...
He's pushing boundaries. It seemed like everything he was touching was just turning to gold at this point. I mean, he really had there were like no duds. Like everything was just hitting perfectly. I mean, he was pairing Bugs and Daffy together. He was coming up with these great, one-off shorts. He was doing the musical numbers like Rabbit of Seville and What's Opera Doc. He was doing his Wile E. Coyote stuff. I mean, Jones was just on fire at this time.
Into 56. So, yeah. Any jump out at you? There's Witch Hazel again.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, I don't know if it's a Witch Hazel one, but there's one where they're retelling the Snow White story. And Witch Hazel, I think, is in the role of, the evil queen or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not Witch Hazel, it's a character who looks a lot like her. At the end, the man in she gets transformed. It's like a young beauty.
Yeah.
And the man in the mirror, it basically like leaves the mirror and chases.
Yeah, he comes to life and tries to chase her. Yeah. I just saw a genie with light brown hair chasing a flying sorceress. Yeah, very funny. Famously, in one of those, they reenact a bunch of Shakespeare plays, and they have a William Shakespeare character who's writing down like Bugs and Witch Hazel reenacting like parts of Macbeth, parts of Romeo and Juliet, parts of Hamlet. So it's an interesting one.
Where else we go? There's a Robinson Crusoe setting for Yosemite Sam.
Yeah, they put him on a deserted island. Yeah. One where Bugs crosses Napoleon's path, another, again, Friz Freleng having Bugs travel to different times. So he's in, Napoleonic France. So that's a good one.
Who's this nasty canaster who comes up every once in a while? I keep on seeing that name.
Yeah, he's kind of like another one of these, Old West characters. This is actually a pretty funny one, this Barbary Coast Bunny. So Bugs, finds this giant, 24 karat gold mine, and he gets swindled out of it. Again, Bugs taking a rare L, but then he comes back and that top right picture right there, in the previous one that you had, the one where he's got like the little stand right there that Bugs is peeking through, that's the short that we're talking about at the top right here.
This one?
Yeah. So he basically swindles Bugs out of this gold that he found, and he goes to found a casino, and then Bugs shows up like a year later and basically just swindles him out of all the gold back by beating him at a bunch of like poker games and stuff, and Bugs is just winning in ridiculous manners, and he's just the luckiest person in the world. Like, he comes inside, he hits jackpot on all the slot machines immediately, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, just while we're on the subject of nasty canasta, there are a load of one-shot villains who are like thugs, or like that boxer that we mentioned, kind of like knuckleheads who crop up a lot in the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
They have like a French guy, Black Jacques Chalac, that comes up a couple times, and Yeah, yeah. Sometimes there's like a fur trapper or something. So yeah, they were trying to, continue to come up with like some villains for like bugs and everything. But at this point, I mean, Yosemite Sam and Elmer Fudd have each been around for 8 years at this point. Even longer for Fudd. So they were pretty established, and that's what
And
audiences wanted.
Fudd, let's be fair, is not much of a threat at this point, is he?
No,
Himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'd say Yosemite Sam is much more dangerous than Elmer Fudd. He's definitely more, witty, I guess, and much more of a threat. Elmer just seems to be a bit of a dope at this point.
yeah, one of the talking about deepest lore. I mentioned that one where Elmer Fudd has this mansion and Sylvester wants to be his like cat. Um, one of the things that is established in Looney Tunes lore is that Elmer Fudd is actually like a billionaire or something. It's like he's an extraordinarily rich man. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, yeah, he's very wealthy and he's a vegetarian, so he doesn't hunt for food. He just hunts for the sport of it, So he's kind of just like a aristocrat character who just likes going out in the woods, just for the sport.
Let's carry on. We're into 56. What else have we got? There's Alibaba Bunny, which I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a pretty funny one.
Tweety and the Beanstalk. So that they're still putting out the fairy tales once in a while. There's this Ralph Phillips again. Who's Ralph Phillips?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm gonna look up who Ralph Phillips is because he keeps on coming up on the second time I've seen him. Let me look him up. Right. Okay. You'll probably recognize him when you see him. Red Hawk. You'll recognize him when you see him. This is Ralph Phillips.
Oh yeah, yeah. There were a number of yeah. Oh yeah, that's the one. That's the A to Z one that got nominated for. Yeah, I do recognize this guy now.
So yeah, I just didn't know he was called Ralph Phillips, to be honest. All right. So what else have we got? I'll put it back on screen. There's What's Opera Doc, which we talked about. That must have won an award, surely.
It didn't win an award, but it's in the National Film Registry.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but that one is an absolute must-watch.
Is that the one where Bugs is on piano? No, that's the one where it's opera.
Yeah, they play. It's a Wagner play. I forget which one it's based off of, but they basically just condense this whole play into like 8 minutes here, and it's wonderful musical numbers, and yeah, it's absolutely perfect. The dialogue's really, really good. The characters like speak their classic lines like in an opera form, like they're constantly rhyming, and everything. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
That's the one I was mentioning earlier, Birds Anonymous, that won an Oscar. When Sylvester tries to, go to the Alcoholics Anonymous for cats,
Dark.
fails miserably.
So dark. Yeah. Talking over this, Sylvester is. I was thinking like, who are my favorite characters, or whatever. Sylvester, I reckon, is a contender for me. I have to think about it, but
he's in a bunch. He's the third most frequent character. It goes Bugs, then Porky, then Sylvester are the three ones that are used the most.
Yeah, there's a Robin Hood one again with Daffy and Porky. Who's this Charlie Dog who crops up? He crops up a bunch as well. Who's this Charlie Dog? I'm gonna have to look him up. Charlie Dog. All right, it's this dog. Just to let you know, it's this one.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a number of these ones where he's paired with like Porky Pig and stuff. He's like a stray. Yeah, yeah. There's some funny ones with that one.
Yeah, you recognize them when you see that see them,
exactly. You wouldn't know like their names because they're not like said. Nighty Night Bugs. I was mentioning that one. That one won it. Next one up. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, that one's
Yeah,
pretty hilarious.
That's a really funny one as well. I was looking up, by the way, I don't know if you've ever seen the Disney version of uh, uh not Cinderella. What's the other one? Sleeping Beauty. If you ever watch Sleeping Beauty, her dad is the king, right?
Hmm.
And the characterization of the king in Mighty Night Bugs has the exact same voice as the king in Sleeping Beauty. To the extent where I looked it up to see if it was the same guy, but I couldn't verify it.
Well, Chuck
So
Jones did work on Sleeping Beauty famously. He left and went over to Disney
did
to
he
work on
really?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I'd be interested to know if that is deliberate that they made the king so similar. Like identical speech patterns, same voice, basically. Maybe they just asked Mel Blanc to do the king from Sleeping Beauty or whatever. Okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, you'll notice how we're slowing down a little bit here, not stopping as many, because kind of when you get to the late 50s into the 60s here, we're starting to run out of really really good ones.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd say that period from the period from 47 to 56 is the absolute golden years. I mean, I don't think you'd be really hard pressed to find some ones that were genuinely terrible.
They were facing real budgetary problems around this time in 58 because Warner Brothers, I found out, had a 90% decrease in revenue, box office revenue, not from the cartoons, from the movies, right? Between 1950 and 1956. And obviously these shorts were attached to movies, right? So, and Jack Warner, the head of the studio, basically didn't really know about or care about Looney Tunes at all.
Yeah,
Like he just didn't care about it. He didn't see any value in it. So, and in fact, we didn't mention that Red Hawk, pretty major, that Leon Slazenger sold his studio to Warner Brothers directly, and they brought in what's the name of the suit that comes in?
I'm drawing a blank right now on the.
There's basically a Warner Brothers suit who comes in. He's pretty hands off as well, and just lets them carry on. But they're under direct studio control now rather than under Leon Slazenger. So when they come on with budgetary cuts, they're a bit more brutal. And I know one of the things that happen is that Robert McKimson has his unit cut.
Yeah, he's the one. Yeah, he's the one that gets the budget cuts the most.
And you can notice with with the names, right? So if you go up a bit, you'll notice on the Robert McKimson shorts, he had a really core team. Just find one where it's his whole team together. A minute. Like his brother, Charles McKimson.
Yeah.
He's got a core team that gets absolutely decimated. They all get fired. And when he comes back, first he has to reapply for his job, right? I think he has to take a pay cut, and he loses all his best guys.
Yeah, back to what we were talking about earlier, how McKimson was kind of like the workhorse, blue collar guy of the bunch who wasn't really fame hungry like the rest of the guys were. He was the one that really came back when the budgetary cuts came down. Chuck Jones, when he left, he left. He never came back. But McKimson was the one who kind of, when Looney Tunes was on life support in the late 60s and trying to adapt to modern television, McKimson and Freeling were the guys that stuck around, even less so Freeling because he was actually getting pretty old. But McKimson was the guy who was trying to, stick things out.
Yeah, but even in this late 50s period here, he's already suffered a massive hit to his unit. So this is one reason that the quality of his stuff drops off in the late 50s because well, he's lost all his best guys, and he has to. In fact, he has to do a lot of the art himself, apparently. So,
Yeah.
then and pretty much he's getting burnt out as well, because I
Yeah.
think
He'd been
he
there
had
from the
been there
beginning. Yeah,
from the
literally
very
from the
start.
beginning. Yeah, in the
Yeah,
30s. So, yeah. Bat and Bunny. That's the one you're talking about where it's all just musicals with Bugs. Down one, first one in 1959.
yeah, Bat and Bunny.
Yeah, he's just
Now,
a
was there?
orchestra conductor. Yeah.
I always remember the Tom and Jerry version of that, where he's on. No, there's one where Bugs is on a piano, and there's one where Tom and Jerry are on. Tom is playing the piano, and Jerry's like in the piano, and he, I seem to remember there was some controversy between MGM and Warner Brothers over.
Yeah, I forget what short it was because there was like 2 or 3 of these where Bugs did the same thing, but there was one where Tom and Jerry and Bugs they both came out in the same year. I think they were even like 3 or 4 months apart from each other. They were really really close. So a lot of the gags were almost identical. Like a mouse is hiding inside the piano keys and cutting the wires and causing problems and stuff like that. And so yeah, there was some controversy as like oh, MGM stole from Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers stole from MGM. It never really got anywhere. Like they didn't end up suing each other or anything like that. But it was like something that was talked about on like the lots back in the day.
Look at that. Due to liberal use of Chinese stereotypes, no longer shown on television.
Yep.
Okay. What else we got here?
Yeah, you'll notice we're not stopping as much because there really are, the quality is starting to go down quite a bit.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much it for the 50s. I mean, it does go on into the 60s, but
yeah,
I think
that's when it's kind of on life support, and there really aren't any, really, really good ones that are there.
See if, I mean, they stop in 63. I'm just go really quickly through these last few. But we're kind of at the fag end, basically. Here,
yeah,
right?
yeah. There's only like maybe 1 or 2 that I know off the top of my head that are from the 60s that are really, really memorable. But yeah, they were definitely getting down to the end. There were like a couple Yosemite Sam and Bugs ones that were good in the 60s. Like Friz Freleng was still doing a pretty good job with those. Because he was like the only one that worked with Yosemite Sam. He wasn't like overused, so he could still like keep going and put him in like interesting circumstances. There was one like where Sam was a Viking. There was one where Sam was like a king's cook. Like the chef for like some a German king or something. So yeah, those are kind of like the only really good ones. And then there was like one last showing that Bugs and Daffy had together in the similar vein of like the Hunting trilogy that was in the 60s. I think it was in 63. But yeah, pretty much by the time we get to the 60s, it became a really big problem with things like whether it was people becoming suburbanized, like people were leaving the theater areas or the invention of the television. So they had big budgetary cuts. And by the time, the early 60s rolled around, they were basically on life support at that point. And then famously, Mr. Warner, we were talking about how he didn't really know much about his animation studio. He criminally undervalued it and ended up selling the rights off to, I forget who the distributors were, to put the shorts on TV for the first time. And they were extremely undervalued at the time. So they didn't have the rights to like Bugs Bunny anymore. And so like throughout the 60s and the 70s, they were making, basically it was literally Sylvester, Daffy Duck, and Speedy Gonzalez, and Robert McKibson was just there running the company on life support. And the quality of these shorts are pretty garbage. There's like not even worth watching any of them. And then eventually they got the rights back, and then it ended up, syndicating them on television, which we all grew up with basically. And it was just a golden age, shorts that were shown.
Yeah, is that where they bring that's the blue ribbon where they start showing
Yeah.
on TV? Is that the idea? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just before we hit the super chats, Red Hawk, I don't know how much time you have left here. We've been going, 2 hours, 40 minutes. Do you have time to maybe come up with who your favorite characters, maybe top 3,
Sure,
and maybe a top 5 shorts? And I mean, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be final, but just the ones that come to mind. I'll try to do the same, and we'll see what we come up with.
all right. I will say my top 3 characters. I'd say number 3 is Daffy Duck, then I'd say Bugs Bunny, and my favorite has got to be Yosemite Sam. I really like Yosemite Sam. I think he's much better than Elmer as an enemy for Bugs, and I think he has the most diverse set of circumstances he's thrown into. I was mentioning how they do a lot of time traveling stuff with him, and they put him. He's very versatile. Yosemite Sam is. So I like him a lot, and I think he's a generally hilarious character as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know me, Red Hawk. I love heels. I just love heels, right? I love villains. But I find like there's something kind of endearing about the Looney Tunes villains as well. So I have to put Wile E. Coyote in as one of my top three.
Mm,
Over the course of the show, I realized how much I like Sylvester as well, even though he's a deeply troubled character. But,
yeah,
I
for
kind
sure.
of, I kind of dig him. And then trying to think of who the third one should be. I tell you one character who I just don't really get all that much, and I don't really understand why he was such a big star. We haven't talked about him much, and that's Porky. Like, what's the deal with Porky Pig? What's his having a stutter is not a character. Like, what?
Yeah, I think it's just, he was just so unique for the time. And we were talking about how he wasn't a star anymore. Once they got into the late 40s and into the 50s, Porky Pig was no longer the front man. He was constantly a sidekick and stuff. And I think he was just a leftover of those old days. I mean, we were mentioning that, a lot of these guys were with the Warner Brothers for 20, 30 years, McKimson, Chuck Jones, Freeling. These guys are there a long time. So I imagine they have a soft spot for, Porky Pig and stuff, and they had to keep him around. I actually think McKimson did the best work with Porky Pig in the 50s. He
Yeah.
partnered him up with Daffy Duck a lot, and I think there's a lot of good ones. Particularly, there's a couple shorts where Porky Pig is just a homeowner, and Daffy Duck comes knocking on his door, and he's like the 50s traveling salesman. And there's some really, really good shorts in there where Daffy's trying to sell him on, home insurance or, push button homes or whatever it is. And there's some pretty good interactions that those two have with each other.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of who my third character would be. I have to think about that. Maybe we'll go through the cartoons, and I'll come up with a third who my third character would be. What about top five? I know it's difficult because there are literally over 1,000 Looney Tunes cartoons.
There were exactly 1,000 that they did before the studio.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly 1,000 before it shut down in '63 officially.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, of the ones that we were talking about, of the characters that we know, they probably accounted for maybe 60% of them, because there were a bunch of one-off stuff that they did a bunch. And then when it was on life support, they were trying to come up with new characters. So Bugs Bunny famously, he was only used in maybe 7 or 8 shorts in the 60s. At that point, they were trying to find new people to give new life to them, because they thought that, oh, people are sick of Bugs, but really what it was is just the times are changing, to quote Bob Dylan. So I mean, it's but yeah, I mean, there are tons of them. I mean, off the top of my head, Duck Amuck has to be in the top 5. That one's amazingly good.
I'm with you there. That's one of mine as well.
Yeah, that one's extremely good. I would, if I could pool the Hunting trilogy into one, because they kind of are just one long, 15-minute short or 20-minute short, basically. I think I'd have to put that in there. I would put in. I know What's Opera Doc is the more popular one, but I personally like Rabbit of Seville better. So I'd put that one in there. And then let me think here. Buccaneer Bunny. That's one where Yosemite Sam is a pirate. It's one of his first appearances, and Bugs is paired with him. That one's very, very, very funny. And I'll throw in that Sylvester and Tweety one we were talking about earlier, when the front yard is full of a bunch of bulldogs, and Sylvester has a weasel his way past it.
Yeah.
I think that one's a must see as well. So yeah, I think that would be my top 5.
I have to go with Feed the Kitty, Duck Amuck, I'm trying to think of. I actually like some of the really weird early ones, like that Art Deco one I mentioned, and just because they're so strange,
Mhm.
I have to pick an early. Like my early one would probably have to be Porky and Wacky Land for Bob Clampett's.
Yeah, that's a good one
It's just
too.
mental. It's just like a Dali painting or something come to
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
So I want to see that era represented at least. So I Porky and Wacky Land. I dig that one where Sylvester's with the suicidal. I want to pick
Oh
a really
yeah,
dark
yeah,
Sylvester one. Maybe actually the one where he goes to like I'll call it the AA meeting.
yeah. That one's pretty funny too.
I don't know. I needed like, a dark Sylvester. Yeah, maybe that one.
Yeah, the more we're talking like this show as well, I'm finding myself liking Sylvester more and more as well. He really is. He might be the most tragic character in Looney Tunes. The guy really just never once gets a win. Whether it's with his son, whether it's against Tweety, whether it's at all. It's poor Sylvester.
And I want to represent Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote in some way as well. The trouble is they all blend into one. I can't like.
Yeah, they're all kind of the same. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all, and that's not to say that they're bad. It's just it's a perfect trope, and if it's not broke, then don't fix it. So
So let's just say a Roadrunner. It doesn't matter which one.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if I had to sit down, I could pick out this one's better than this one or whatever. But yeah, that maybe the one where Wile E. Coyote gets the Superman costume. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, he just flies right into a wall. Yeah. There's one where he dresses up as Batman too at one point, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, and then for my character, I think Bugs is a bit of a smart ass, Like I know that's his whole character, but
yeah,
I kind of irritated by the fact he always wins,
Yeah,
know,
that's why you got to go watch that Rabbit Rampage one where Elmer gets a win on him, Duck Amuck style. That one's it's genuinely very hilarious. Short too, even though the trope had already been done before, so it didn't hit as hard as the first one did. But I do generally think that one's funnier than Duck Amuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I still haven't really. Why not? I'll pick the Chuck Jones version of Daffy Duck. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Yeah, I do like Jones's Duck. He really does understand Daffy Duck as the character absolutely the best. Friz Freleng kind of adopts Jones's model for Daffy a couple times as well, but yeah, what Jones did to change Daffy Duck from just this wacky, almost like Woody Woodpecker kind of character, just hooping and hollering and jumping around, and then turning him to a prideful and greedy, avarice kind of character who's jealous of Bugs. That it really was a fantastic change.
Yeah. So if you're watching in the chat, or if you're watching it on replay later on, tell us in the comments who are your top 3 characters. Just give us your top 3 characters. Go. Yeah. I mean, I think for some reason I feel like Foghorn Leghorn will be like a cult favorite with a lot of guys who watch the show. Don't know why that is. But.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be really popular for Southern Americans. I mean, I like him, but I think he just gets overshadowed by some other more memorable characters. But yeah, he's got some pretty funny shorts, and he is just generally a hilarious character too, his word games and the way he talks and his mannerisms. So yeah, he's a good one.
Yeah, I also want to give a how can I put it? An honorable mention to Speedy Gonzalez's slow Mexican mate. The skinny one.
Yeah, Slowpoke Rodriguez. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because he's so slow, he just always carries a gun with him. Because he can't run fast. So.
Yeah. All right. So just a couple of super chats before we get out of here. I may actually be coming back later on because I've been promising to do a preview of my Who Would You Do tournament.
Oh boy.
Coming up in 3 days. and I've been meaning to do it, and I just never find a moment. Mathematically, tonight is the only night I can actually do it because I've got my shows the next 2 nights, and then I have to go back. Hang out with AAA on Thursday. So it's the only day to do it is tonight, even though I'm tired and don't want to. So maybe later on AA Gold, look out. I'll be doing a preview. I'll go and have a cigar, have something to eat, and then I'll come back and preview the tournament. This is a Puritan-free, prude-free, homosexual-free, woman-free zone, Red Hawk. You're looking forward. You're looking forward to my tournament. So Glow in the Dark says, would you think Coyote would order food instead of traps? Also, Tweety Bird is kind of an asshole when Sylvester is happy or is able to get rid of his obsession. Tweety Bird entices him.
Yeah, and
don't they tone Tweety Bird's nastiness down over time?
Yeah. In the beginning, when they first came up with Tweety, he was much more like confrontational and much more of an ass. And then like as the shorts progressed, he became much more of like an innocent victim of circumstance character. And he wasn't as violent. He was kind of like getting other people to do his dirty work for him, like whether it was like barnyard dogs or something like that. But in the original ones, he was still using like sticks of dynamite and stuff like everybody else. But in like the later shorts, like, oh, Tweety's at the zoo and he's just flying around and Sylvester's getting attacked by like alligators or tigers or something. It's not necessarily Tweety doing the bad stuff, or Granny. They outsourced a lot of like Tweety's like violent tendencies to Granny.
Do you like Granny?
She's okay. I mean, like I think it's an interesting character. I mean, she's used a couple other times with like Yosemite Sam as like the rich woman that inherited a bunch of money, and Yosemite Sam tries to woo her. But another like tier 2 character, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Apparently that guy is called Slowpoke.
Yeah.
Speedy's cousin.
Yeah. Slowpoke Rodriguez, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's my favorite minor character. Glow in the Dark says, my dad likes Foghorn Leghorn. The reason I think is because we have a relative like him. My great uncle is a bullshitter loudmouth who gets him and others in trouble. Stereotype of people that used to be more common.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
He also says, this may hurt you as an Englishman, but what about a deep lore on Asterix? He has a rich history and has a lot of transgressive stereotypes. It has some reactionary themes. I'd have to get my wife on for Asterix because she was really into both Asterix and Tintin when she was a kid, whereas I was kind of aware of it, but I wasn't into it, if you know what I mean. So it's a bit difficult if you weren't into it in the first place to then do the lore on it, Horowitz, Feinberg, and Horowitz says $25 because Chuck Jones. Well, thank you very much for being so much. He also says, I first heard classical music and opera from watching Looney Tunes.
Yeah, that's true. They use a lot, for sure. I mean, back to what we were talking about, Carl Stalling. I mean, the guy did a very, very good job.
Yeah, and I reckon it can teach you all sorts of little. If you're, I mean, I would say they have limited educational value, as in terms of teaching you facts or anything like that. But just in terms of like little bits about the world, I frequently came across things later in life where I was like, oh, that's where it was from. You kind of, because you forget how much stuff they reference in these cartoons.
Yeah,
just like I didn't realize, oh, they were riffing off that, or oh, that was popular then, or so some of that original context is lost.
Yeah, there was a lot of like pop culture references of the time in there. I mean, you do get a lot of those, and it is that's definitely happened to me multiple times as well. We're like, oh, I've heard this before, and like it's from Looney Tunes, but no, it's not from Looney Tunes. It's from this other thing, and Looney Tunes was just using it. So.
Justin Dabari says, as a kid, Tom and Jerry just edged out as my favorite, but I always enjoyed the intelligently written humor in Looney Tunes. Speaking of Warner Brothers animation, weren't you going to do a deeper lore on Batman, the animated series? Yeah, well, the fourth week of Batman, my Batman week, was cancelled premature. Batman month was cancelled 3 weeks in. I seem to remember. Quite why that was, I can't remember now. But maybe one day. I was a big fan of Batman the animated series.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's tragic that Kevin Conroy or Conroy just died.
yeah,
Recently.
he is the best Batman voice by a mile.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
for
you
sure.
could even say the best Batman. Period.
Yeah, that was a very good series, the Batman animated series. So if anyone hasn't watched it, go and watch it.
RCW, and I noticed, by the way, that on the Warner Brothers Golden Collection, there are like, it's a brilliant collection because there's loads of like extras and documentaries and shorts and stuff on there, where a lot of the stuff we told you tonight you'd find out and more. But I noticed Paul Dini, who was involved with Batman the animated series, crops up a lot on the commentaries. Like, he just turns up and does the commentaries on the various cartoons and things.
Really?
So yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, he was a fan. He's a fan of Looney Tunes. RCW says, "Where are the characters' accents from?"
Well, I mean, like they're based off of different parts of America. Like Bugs famously is like a Brooklyn kind of like New York accent. Foghorn's like the American South, and like Porky's got his own stutter, and Elmer Fudd kind of got a weird tune to it as well. And Sylvester's got his lisp. Like they did a good job of making all like the main characters like sound very different from each other. Again, credit to Mel Blanc.
Yeah, was Bugs meant to be some sort of riff on Groucho Marx?
Yeah, yeah. They did get a
Oh,
little inspiration.
while we're on the subject, by the way, when I was a kid, I had a videotape which had a short with Bugs Bunny as a film director, smoking a cigarette or smoking a cigar, watching like a show reel, and I have never been able to find what that was.
It might
Are
have
you
been
aware?
from the Bugs Bunny show, which was a syndicated TV show in the 60s and 70s that came on like every Saturday morning in America. And it was, do you remember when like they had all these shows, like remember like Johnny Cash famously had his own show, like the Johnny Cash
Yeah.
show and stuff like
Uh-huh.
this. And Bugs Bunny had one similarly. And basically what they did is they had Bugs Bunny like presenting a bunch of shorts, and so like he was like presenting them to the audience, and they were just a bunch of old Looney Tunes shorts that had syndicated for television. So
Interesting.
yeah, and that went on for that show was on for like 35 years or something. I think it ended in like the late 90s, and then like they just started, packaging the shorts together in like 30-minute segments or 1-hour segments, and they just put them on like Cartoon Network or whatever it was over here. I'm not sure what you guys had over there, but that's what they had over here. They had like 1 hour, and they just had it titled Looney Tunes, and it would be like a hodgepodge of shorts, and you'd have no idea what they were. There'd be like one with Sylvester and Tweety, and one with Bugs and Yosemite Sam, and one, with Foghorn or something, and they would just be on for an hour.
I just have this vivid memory of like Bugs sitting in a director's chair smoking, and there being like a ludicrous amount of ash in the ashtray. And he just carries on just smoking in it, and yeah, he's presenting stuff. So maybe it was that show. The guy mentioning the Asterix game on the Master System, there was actually an arcade game of Asterix that I used to play quite a lot, because there was a pub across the road that had this Asterix arcade game in it, and occasionally I'd go in there and stick a few 20p's in it. Machiavelli Sucks to Go says Johnny Quest and Popeye. Well, they're not Looney Tunes characters.
Yeah, no.
Machiavelli Sucks to Go, unfortunately, so they don't count. How do you? I mean, this is something we haven't talked about. Comparing Looney Tunes to the other big cartoon like MGM, Popeye, Warner Brothers, later on Hanna-Barbera. How does Looney Tunes rank for you versus the other big animation studios?
Oh, I think it's lights out. Like they're the absolute best. I mean, I never really cared too much for like the old like Walt Disney cartoons. I think Disney, hit his stride with the animated movies and features, not so much with like the Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck cartoons. They just weren't as good.
Yeah, I'll just say something controversial. for me, by far the best Disney cartoons are the like mockumentaries with Goofy, like Goofy playing golf, and those
Mm,
ones where there's like a narrator and Goofy's just trying to show you how to play golf, or he tries to show you how to build a house or something. They are pretty much like the only good Disney. Like the Mickey Mouse shorts are shite. They're
yeah.
boring, basically.
Yeah, and
Uh,
this is what set like Warner Brothers apart, because they were intentionally comedic shorts. They were funny. There were slapstick gags, there was wordplay gags. Like everybody else at the time was just trying to be, deadpan and serious, trying to put off this new art form as like actual art and actual seriousness. But Warner Brothers, set the stage for actual humor to be involved in these things. And of course, MGM adopted it with things like Tom and Jerry, and then Hanna Barbera famously. But Hanna-Barbera only like got on the stage because they were the first guys that actively adopted their shorts for television as opposed to like theaters. So they kind of got like
mhm.
a head start on everybody else. But even their
What
characters
was
like
Hanna Barbera's like?
Yogi
Not really
Bear.
sure. It's more like Flintstones, Scooby Doo, stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, and Yogi Bear is another famous one, and Snagglepuss and stuff like that. But they're just not as good. The Pink
But
Panther shorts.
they're not.
you know.
I mean, they're really shorts though. The Yogi Bear and stuff. It's long. Like it. I remember them being like 20-minute shows, so
Yeah.
half-hour shows. Is that right?
hmm Yeah. Yeah, because they were
Um,
actually, syndicated for TV, so they'd put them in like, those famous half-hour blocks that we all know and love today, or like the hour blocks with like commercials in between. So that's where, I mean, Quick Draw McGraw was another one, from these Hanna-Barbera guys. But yeah, Looney Tunes is still king as far as I'm concerned. They're just so much better. I mean, as far as like cartoons go, like Bugs Bunny like is the cultural icon. I mean, he's the mascot for Warner Brothers. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. One of the only cartoon characters that has one. It's yeah, Looney Tunes is superior.
I mean, Popeye for me, I never understood why they were chasing olive oil. Was that the joke? Like, what the
she's very
hell?
she's very mid. Yeah.
Olive oil, the most mid. Although I have to say that increasingly my wife says I look like Bluto. So. Yeah. Well, speaking of Tintin, Captain Haddock. So a couple more. Darth Calhoun says, Bugs Bunny, Daffy, and Yosemite Sam are my top characters. I do like smartasses, but I also love Sam because of his serious masculinity.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
Munchie Wolf says, I thought I saw a putty cat. I did tour a putty cat. I mean, am I the
Yeah.
only person who just hates Tweety Pie? I hate Tweety Pie.
Yeah. You know, love-hate relationship, but I mean, I guess we really didn't cover, like each of the characters has their own catchphrases, like all of them do, like Sylvester's got suffer and succotash, and Tweety Bird famously has the I taught Woody Cat. Bugs Bunny's is what's up, Doc, and Elmer Fudd, be very, very quiet. Like that, all of them have, these very, unique catchphrases that they use, which is pretty cool. You're despicable, Daffy Duck. So
Yeah, I just think that versus the other studios, Red Hawk, Looney Tunes were just a lot more inventive with what they did, over their run. I just
mhm.
think that okay, you could say, well, each of the guys fell into like their formulas and things, but I mean, there are so many different formulas.
Mhm.
It's like if you look at every Popeye cartoon is literally just spinach,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah.
like literally for like 20 straight years. At least with Looney Tunes, you've got even if they had formulas, there's probably like legitimately like 12 or 13 different formulas
Yeah,
over
there's a lot of
over.
variety. I mean, like Tom and Jerry, I mean, it's always the same, right? Cat chases mouse. You know. But I mean, we were just talking about how like each of like the main three directors has a different way of treating Bugs Bunny, like in portraying him and what he does, and so is very, very unique. And I think it would be interesting to see like in the comments section, if anyone listening to this who like has grown up with Looney Tunes and then goes back to watch some of these things with this new lens that we're talking about, they might be able to pick up some of this stuff. Like the difference between like a Frizz Freeling one and a McKimson one and a Jones one, when they tackle Bugs Bunny differently. You know, it's
Yeah,
very,
once
very
once
interesting.
once you start getting into that, because I wasn't aware of a lot of this until I bought this box set and started getting into it a bit more as an adult, and it really is interesting how you can see their personalities in each of the different, in each of their unit lines, if you want to put it that way. You can really see it comes through a lot. I would say the feel of a Fritz Freeling Bugs is different from a Chuck Jones Bugs to me now.
Yeah, for sure. Which again makes Warner Brothers so unique. I mean, we had like critiques of like Mr. Warner earlier, but the guy was very, hands off, for the most part, which, definitely let the creativity of these guys like definitely shine through. Like I mean, I know we're big fans of Walt Disney in these circles, but Walt Disney was a total hard ass, with his animation and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, and granted, he did put out some of the greatest works of all time, but it definitely didn't shine through with his, cartoon shorts, which were
Well, the
garbage.
difference is that Walt Disney was an artist first and a capitalist second, right? Whereas these guys like Leon Schlesinger and the Warner Brothers Studios they just had no interest in animation whatsoever.
Yeah. Famously, Mr. Warner didn't even know where the Termite Terrace was on his set. When asked about it, he was like, "It's on the set." Because like they had the Warner Brothers lot in Hollywood, and famously he had no idea where it was. He just had zero concept. He was like, "Okay, these guys are making money. They want this budget. Okay, give it to them."
Who made the Woody Woodpecker shorts? Was that a different studio again?
Yeah, it was different. It wasn't Warner Brothers.
No, I know it wasn't Warner Brothers, but was that an MGM one? I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think it was MGM.
I'm
But
looking up now. It was made by Walter Lantz Productions, but distributed by Universal. Right. Okay.
I guess that makes
So
sense.
that was Universal.
Yeah.
That was Universal's animation line. Okay.
I guess that makes sense because Woody Woodpecker appears at like Universal Studios and stuff, like next door to Disneyland and stuff. He's got like his own ride and everything like that. So
interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't know. For me, it's not even comparable. These others. If you're talking movies, then there's a conversation between Looney Tunes and Disney.
Yeah.
If you bring in the movies, right? But for the shorts, there's just no comparison in my view. So
yeah.
And I think that's just about it. Red Hawk, anything else you'd like to promote, sir, before we get out of here?
I will just promote again my own channel, Red Hawk Man's Hour this Thursday. I'm having 2 Manosphere guys on. We're going to talk about No Nut November, so come over and talk about that. Recently, I had a Semi-Agog on. We were talking about the hero's journey, so that was a really good episode. You guys should all go and listen to. And then I also shield the Old Glory Club. We got Substack articles coming out Monday, Wednesday, and then videos every Friday. So come on, join us for that. We had Oron McIntyre on recently to talk about Donald Trump's announcement for president. And that was a really good conversation. So go check us out. And thanks for having me, AA. This was tons of fun. I know I was like sniping at you on Twitter like for months. Like, can we do this stream, please? And this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about some of the other ones, and I'm looking at Fred Quimby, but other than Tom and Jerry, what's he got? See, what I'm saying is, it's not just Bugs Bunny. We've got Daffy Duck, we've got Porky Pig, we've got Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. There's a whole stable and each one of them are amazing in their own right.
Mm-hmm. And they're all very different too. Like they're. I mean, even when we get into like tier 2 characters like Sam Sheepdog and stuff, like, it's a basic, good guy catches bad guy kind of deal, but it's got its own twist to it. It makes it very unique.
Yeah, they've got Droopy as well. That was Tex Avery's thing. Like, Droop, really? You're putting Droopy up against these guys that we're talking about? I don't really buy that. I will just say again, 25% off all my courses. Up for the next, you've got tonight, tomorrow, up until the end of Wednesday, you've got to get your 25% off. Promo code MERIT. Where is it? Where is it? Merit.
Merit, pure merit, such merit. merit, pure merit, such
It's not working. So I don't know why it's not working.
It was popping up for us. Oh, yeah, he's gone. Oh boy, now I'm in charge of the stream here. Oh,
I don't know what happened. My merit button wasn't working.
it popped up for me.
It didn't pop up for me for some reason. So
Weird.
all right, well, I think for this stream and this stream only, rather than having get out and maybe you shouldn't be living here. Surely we need to end with.
That's all, folks. Yeah.
Should we?
Yeah. The merry-go-round broke down. Yeah.
The merry-go-round broke down. Let me play it. Hold on. Bye, everyone. I'll see you later. Look out for me on AA Gold, and I'll be doing a preview of my tournament in autistic detail with stats. Not bloody working.